The main character stroked his cat Nick on the head and unleashed a theatrical rant about his boring life. Complete nonsense. The guy says that, against all odds, he finally burst into the light of a brighter future. The cat's magic and his exchange skill fused into a cheat code. He could snatch anything he set his sights on. In his other world, the guy squared off against a ferocious, untamed, colossal tiger, determination roaring in his chest. Scale it to the summit. A crackling energy ripped through the air. The girl escorting the carriage felt the energy slam through her. The second girl spun to Karina, alarm flaring as she spotted her friend's odd reaction and blurted out her concern. Karina ripped off her hood and, eyes wide, confessed the feeling inside her was strange. He ripped open his past and confessed, then landed the gut punch. His grandfather, the man who raised him after his parents died, was dead. He flopped onto his bed, stared at the ceiling, and a cold thought sliced through him. Was he doomed to be left alone for the rest of his life? 2 hours ago, the funeral and all the memorial rites wrapped up, and it hit him. 10 days since his grandfather died. Asakura Daichi read the letter that spelled it out. After the grueling selection process, he'd been rejected for the job. Crushed by the news, he dropped his hand onto the bed, fingers going slack as the phone shot from his palm. Memories of others' sharp, dismissive words slammed into Daichi, each barb dragging him down until the painful truth hit. This guy's life is sad. His cat launched itself onto his stomach, snapping him out of his heavy thoughts. Daichi wasn't completely alone. His pet kept vigil at his side. He clenched his jaw, swallowed his sour mood, and with nowhere else to go, after lunch he set off to hunt for a job. Awareness slammed into the main character as his eyes snapped to something. His breath hitched as the little box slammed back into his mind. Rings tumbled inside. The main character snatched one and slid it onto their finger. It hugged him like it had been tailored to his bones. Nick snatched one of the rings Daichi had spotted, snapped at the cat to leave the jewelry alone, and plunged his hand into the can to pull the ring free. Magic ripped through the air. A sudden jolt rips everything open. He squints, eyes narrowing against the shock. He stumbled into a vast clearing, the mountains towering like silent sentinels on the horizon. Daichi froze as shock slammed into him, breath snatched away and his mind going white. He clung to the comforting lie that it was all just a dream. The boy swept his gaze over the rolling hills before him once more. Daichi blinked, clueless where he was or how he'd gotten here. Panic ripped through him, so he clutched his cat Nick like a lifeline. He clawed through the haze, piecing the sequence together, and the first thing to snap into focus was him lying on the bed before he moved. Ravenous pangs clawed at him, yet he wasn't any hungrier than a minute before, so he concluded only a sliver of time had passed. Clarity slammed into Daichi. Maybe the ring was the missing piece. Panic slammed into him. He tore through his pockets with frantic hands, then leaned in and peered into Nick's mouth. He snapped his gaze to the ground, heart hammering. Had the ring fallen? His search came up empty. Then someone slipped the ring onto his finger, and the protagonist was sure he couldn't lose it that easily. Doubt clawed at him again. Was the ring the reason he'd ended up here? He wondered if that single event had triggered everything tearing through his life right now. Daichi couldn't believe it. This wasn't a manga or anime, and then it hit him like a thunderbolt. A cold, shattering realization hit him. This wasn't his world. He was somewhere else entirely. The wind lashed the grass into a frantic rustle, and the ground pulsed beneath his feet. Reality slammed into him. He finally understood that everything was real. He shouted that if he'd landed in another world, he had to have a cheating ability. At least that was his desperate hope as Daichi jabbed at the air, trying to pull up the statistics window. He clamped his eyes shut to summon the stats, then peeled them open inch by inch, his face a stone mask. Slumped on the grass, defeat crushing him, a cold realization hit. He was in deep trouble. Nick the cat flicked a wet tongue across his master's cheek. The man grinned and rhetorically asked, "Is it all the same to you, Nick?" Only then did Daichi's jaw drop. His cat was soaring through the air. He catapulted away from his own pet, terror ripping through him. He whipped around to the cat and demanded to know how he had learned to fly. As a joke, he spun to his cat and blurted, "Maybe I just gained a cheating ability." Brooding and beaten, Daichi replayed every blow he'd taken and swore he couldn't survive in this world. It slammed into him like a lightning strike. His cat could cheat, and that was just the beginning. He had to unmask every other trick the pet might have pulled. At that exact moment, a window erupted onto the screen. Daichi expected Nick's stats, but the window betrayed him, flashing his own name and branding him with homeless magic plus the exchange and evaluation skills. Shock slammed into him the moment his eyes landed on what lay before him. His guess crumbled as the screen flashed Daichi's stats, and Daichi whooped, thrilled to discover he could cheat too. He could decipher the appraisal skill at a glance, but the exchange left him utterly baffled. Nick spiraled around his master as he tore through the sky. Daichi activated the assessment skill, and a glowing status screen snapped into view. This time the cat's stats stole the spotlight. Nick straight up outshone the main character, channeling spiritual magic of earth, water, fire, and wind. Grinning, he realized both he and the cat had cheating abilities. No reason to return to Japan, so he vowed to fight and survive in this new world. The main character resolved to push the assessment skill to its limits and discover exactly what it could do. Daichi pressed his palm to the trunk, activated his evaluation skill, and instantly measured the tree's height, a leaf's width, the sheer number of leaves, and every other precise detail about it. Every scrap of that intel fizzled into dull, everyday trivia, completely ordinary, nothing remarkable. Your move, unmask the power of the second exchange skill. Did you tap the icon on the screen? Something slammed into his mind, and the main character sank into a lifeless stupor. He smashed his fist into his forehead to snap himself back, reeling from the shock and clutching his cat to his chest as he fought to understand what had just happened. Nick bristled at the pressure on his host's arm and erupted into a frantic protest. Daichi quickly lowered his pet to the ground, apologizing. He blurted another apology, pleaded for his friend to sit tight, then snapped his hand out and jabbed a finger at the tree. The tree unraveled into silver light and slipped through a jagged tear into another dimension. The tree was gone. A shallow pit gaped where it had stood. Nick gaped as that massive plant vanished into thin air. Daichi caught his pet's bewildered stare and shot. Was that really unexpected? The main character jabbed a finger at the screen, eyes blazing, and implored his companion to look. He yanked the tree back into place, and his cat shot away, hissing in pure alarm. Nick vaulted back to his master's side. The tree snapped back into its old spot. The cat, furious at its owner, spat a razor hiss straight at him. Daichi apologized and begged his pet not to be angry. The main character resolved to seriously test his abilities and once more marked the tree in that space. The saved tree exploded into a shower of points. He zeroed in on shoes, every thought laser-focused, as raw energy coalesced in the palm of his outstretched hand. She stepped out in brand new sneakers, and Daichi seized the moment, pulling off exactly what he'd planned. The main character smirked, utterly satisfied by his own replaceability. Now he's poised not just to survive, but to strike it rich, his future blazing brighter than ever. A fierce resolve flared up in Daichi, too. He hauled a few more trees into the storage area. He hoisted a huge stone and wedged it against the towering tree. The screen can light up with dozens of saved item icons. He traded whole groves and piles of stone for a chainsaw. It cost a fortune, and price wasn't even the limit. Daichi grabbed it just to test it. Hunger gnawed at the boy as his cat spat a sharp hiss and fixed its gaze on the forest. And the guy, seeing the pet's alarm, turned to Nick and demanded, "What happened?" A massive paw slammed into the earth. Nick's hair shot up like static lightning, and Daichi recoiled, jaw dropping at the sight. A massive jet-black tiger slipped out of the forest, muscles humming, eyes zeroed on the two homeless travelers. Daichi locked eyes with the fearsome tiger, and his heart melted. He found it unbelievably adorable. The predators bellowed menacingly, and he crumpled to the ground as his hands began to tremble. He lunged to drag the animal into his vault. It failed spectacularly. He'd already learned he couldn't take birds or insects. The storage accepted only plants and hurled every other living thing back. Weaponless and cornered, Daichi's pulse thundered. He had to scare the beast off, so he hatched a reckless, brilliant plan. The main character decided to strike first and cut the enemy down before they could even lift a finger to fight back. He forced the words out. "The tiger's still far off. It's fine," trying to tame the panic hammering in his chest. He forced himself back to a full 100 meters, the only distance that would open the vault in time, and Daichi wasn't testing his abilities for nothing. He clutched Nick to his chest, hugging the cat tight. Nick spat a furious hiss and unsheathed his claws. Daichi murmured soothing words to his tiger as the massive beast crept closer. He'd nailed the timing and snapped his vault into existence. The black tiger plunged into the pit. Daichi's grin split his face. The first step of his plan had worked. Up next, a voice barked, "Bring the sea cargo container!" He conjured a geyser of liquid nitrogen that echoed the tiger trap they'd feared, then roared, "It's over now!" The tiger plummeted toward a vat of liquid nitrogen, claws slashing at the trap's metal walls as it fought to hook on and halt the fall. The beast plummeted into the pit, where a trap lay in wait. The main character slammed onto the seat as liquid nitrogen fog clawed at him, breath snagged and eyes razor-sharp, watching every second to see if his plan would hold. Flush with triumph from his flawlessly executed idea, Daichi whirled to his cat Nick and demanded the verdict on his plan. He was about to brag that it was a walk in the park when Nick growled, and the main character's joyless shock hit as something launched out of the pit. The tiger ripped itself free from the trap and let loose a thunderous roar, fury blazing in its eyes. Panic slammed into him as he scrambled, desperate for a weapon, any weapon, to face the beast. Nick the cat let out a razor-sharp hiss and unleashed a blistering barrage of water bullets. The tiger exploded into motion and slipped out of the surprise attack's path. The bullet had ripped a chunk from the tree. Daichi's breath hitched as he realized this was what his cat's spiritual magic looked like. The tiger still had its sights locked on the protagonist, poised to pounce. He tore through his inventory in a panic, fingers snagging at anything that could help him fashion a wall and carve out an escape. The main character is plotting. The tiger barreled at him, a blur of muscle and raw fury. Daichi's knees quivered. He slammed his hand down and slapped his knee to jolt himself steady. Cornered with nowhere to run, he steeled himself and dared the tiger in his mind to strike. If it answered, that strike would end the beast. Shock ripped through him as time bent, and Tiger's movements slowed into a crawl, leaving him stunned and utterly bewildered. A stab of doubt hit him, but there was no time to think. He lunged straight at the tiger. A massive boulder slammed down onto the beast. This time, the main character also dared to believe the attacking predator was finally finished. Not taking any chances, the main character slammed his skill into action and snapped the beast into his inventory. Hunger clawed at Daichi. He was still ravenous. He swept his gaze around him once more. The trap lay primed. He'd stocked supplies, weapons, and tools within arm's reach for whatever came. Daichi flipped open the remote screen. Using a quadcopter, he spotted a cart flanked by people, stowed the technique in his storage, and once again confirmed his exchange ability was straight-up cheating. He raked his hand through his cat's fur as the cat gorged from its bowl, then looked him in the eye and declared, "It's time for first contact." Under a clear blue sky, two girls rode, their horses ambling along the trail. Their breath caught on the road when a lone traveler stepped into view, Daichi, and he waved, calling out a bright greeting to the girls. One of them bristled at the stranger and snapped, "Are you traveling alone?" He shot back that he was traveling with the animal. The second girl leaned in, fascinated by what she thought was a cat. Hoisting his absurdly long cat like a banner, he swept the crowd to find out if people there rarely saw cats. The second girl, eyes locked on the pet, blurted, "They often see cats, but never one with fur this long." He stepped forward, announced his name, and proudly dropped his cat's name. And the second girl hooked her fingers and began peeling back her hood. She stepped into the light and declared, "I'm Alicia Hartland." Confusion slammed into Daichi, then it snapped into a stark realization. The girl looked like a schoolgirl. Suspicion latched on to the first girl's boyfriend, and the main character even invited Alicia to pet his cat if she wanted. A razor-sharp sword erupted into being at Daichi's throne. The first girl barked at Alicia to back off and pressed the guy again, insisting it was only him and his cat. The second girl murmured an apology. Daichi swore it was only him and his cat. Then he shrugged and said he made his living as a merchant. Amid a jumble of odds and ends, the main character convinced himself he was the man who'd walked away from the village and become a merchant, a legend he'd forged. His small bag brimmed with useful items, and the main character snatched one out to show the girls. It was a flashlight. He tilted it beneath his chin and blasted a beam up across his face. The first girl froze, tension crackling as surprise spread over her, and Alicia leaned in, puzzled but clearly hooked. The first girl, squared up in front of her friend, demanded whether the tool was magic. Alicia snapped that she felt nothing, not a whisper of enchantment. Vindication burned in Daichi. His suspicion was right. Real magic and enchanted tools existed here, and that explained the magic tally on his stats. He planted the flashlight on the ground and told the girls to take it. Alicia snatched a flashlight and, copying the protagonist, angled it under her chin so light clawed up her face. She tested it again and found no trace of magic, and the first girl gaped in stunned disbelief. Theichi's curiosity flared as he asked if it was only the two of them on the road. The protector, the first girl, bristled, her hand snapping to her sword as she declared she was accompanying Alicia. Fear hammered his chest, but he swallowed it and asked if he could join them to reach the nearest village or town, then forced out a second question. What's the escort's name? Alicia was certain a true villain wouldn't ask for that, but the protector's gaze stayed fixed on Daichi, suspicion burning in their eyes. To wipe away their doubts, he held out his belt and stripped the weapon from his hip, but the attendant bristled, snapping that handing over a useless weapon was pointless. Daichi was lost. The first girl spelled out her comment, and the guy's hands gave him away. He couldn't wield a bow or a knife. He beamed and owned it, admitting outright that the person beside him had seen right through him, and the girl froze, eyes wide at his calm confession. The first girl finally caved and agreed to ride with the main character to the main merchant. The guy's grin split his face with relief. The maintainer revealed herself as Karina, and Alicia stepped up to help Daichi. He thanked the girls for agreeing to help and shot his hand forward for a handshake when Nick suddenly launched himself out of the owner's hands. The cat pounced toward Alicia. Giddy, she called Nick Mila and nuzzled her cheek against him. Daichi stayed rooted, arm thrust forward. He spun to Karina, hand still out, and thanked her for her help. I snatched my hand back. She spun and hissed at the guy to stay a meter away. She wouldn't let the mage get that close to them. The boy gaped, baffled they'd mistaken him for a mage. The escort sneered, refusing to believe the lone traveler lacked combat skills. Daichi's eyes snapped. He got Karina, and the defender barked again that the guy could tag along, but had to be kept at arm's length. The main character's eyes snapped to the escort's long sword, and the girl froze as the merchant's voice shifted. Daichi brushed it off. He figured he and his companion were the same age, so why make a fuss? Karina ignored his words and snapped a razor warning. One wrong move and she'd attack, and the main character only stoked her suspicion. The flashlight in Alicia's hands erupted into a new color, jolting her into a stunned, wide-eyed stare. Rough hands dragged Daichi into a roaring trading caravan. Tarina vaulted from the carriage, an elderly man trailing behind her. He closed in on Daichi and asked, "Were you escorted to Karam City?" They gave their names, and the older man, Klaus Bertram, proclaimed he commanded this caravan and helmed the Bertram Company. Unaware of how far Klaus's influence reached, the main character slapped on a polite mask just in case, and Daichi dropped an audacious suggestion. Klaus snapped, "What can you offer in return?" The novice merchant thrust a knotted pouch forward in reply. Klaus Bertram whirled to his assistant. The assistant shot a sharp nod, strode to Daichi, snatched the bag and slammed it into Klaus's hands. Klaus's fingers dove for the pouch and began working the knots free. Klaus's breath hitched and his eyes snapped wide as the bag's contents slammed into view. The company head claimed the main character was either outrageously generous or utterly clueless about the product's true cost. Daichi owned up. He didn't know the goods' real value in his country, and Klaus mulled it over. The novice trader revealed that prices swing from market to market and hour to hour. And though the crop is grown in Daichi, it still commands a fortune and remains painfully rare. Klaus instantly clocked the main character's honesty. The man, a merchant, barked that lies only ruin a trader's name. The company head nodded sharply at Daichi's claim. Relief crashed over him. He bellowed thanks to Klaus and proclaimed his grandfather had taught him exactly how to do it. Klaus matched that sincerity and struck back with brutal, unfiltered honesty. In the company head's country, pepper is prized like gold, likely commanding steeper prices than in Daichi's homeland. Pepper seeds refused to grow anywhere on the continent, making the spice an exclusive luxury only aristocrats and the very wealthy could import. It landed like a punch. The pepper trade needed a permit, and Klaus immediately assumed Daichi, a foreigner, lacked one. Worst of all, his blood boiled the moment the locals realized he wasn't even from this continent. His appearance shouted from another continent. Daichi admitted he was a foreigner and begged them to keep it quiet. Klaus snapped that hiding it would drag them both into needless trouble. and he silenced his assistant with a single, sharp gesture. The main character shot back, "Thanks for the warning." The trading boss barked he'd price the pepper on the spot, but the novice trader shot up a hand and begged everyone to wait. He fired one last question at Klaus. Did he want to buy anything else from him? Daichi set his sights on becoming a merchant in this country, but as a foreigner with no roots, he couldn't do it alone. So he appealed to Klaus for help. The company head insisted once more that the main character was honest, and the main character just smiled and said he wants to see the good in people. Klaus also declared, flat and fierce, that he wouldn't merely help Daichi become a merchant. The novice trader fired a blunt, point-blank question at the company head. "How much pepper do you want?" And the head coolly raised 3 fingers. He admitted to himself it was madness to expect the head of the trading company to help him just like that. Then slid 3 more bags of pepper to Klaus. Klaus flashed a satisfied grin. Daichi thundered that you must always treat your trading partner with respect, swearing it was his grandfather's lesson, except he was lying. He'd only read it in a book. The company head barked for his assistant Lloyd to snatch the pepper, and Klaus whirled to Karina. He barked, "Remain at Alicia's side and escort Daichi to Karam City." Klaus leaned in and asked Alicia if she herself was okay with the arrangement, and she met his gaze and said without hesitation she had no problem with it. Oh. The head of the company and his assistant sprinted back to the carriage, urgency burning in every stride. Daichi hurled a grateful shout at the departing clowns as they turned to go, thanking them for his help. Karina dipped into a noble bow and vowed to accompany the main character. Alicia spun into a graceful curtsy and pledged to join them, and together they strode off somewhere. Daichi demanded where they were going. Alicia snapped that they were charging straight for the head of the escort. He squared on Alicia, met her gaze, and asked her to drop the formalities and treat him like a friend. Alicia snapped, ready to argue, but the main character derailed her in a flash by unveiling his pet and announcing it as his partner. The girl melted, cooing at how cute it was. Daichi locked eyes with Nick. Nick locked eyes back. Then the guy shouted, "It's so happy and cute!" as the cat started slipping from his hands. Alicia lunged and snatched the cat. Satisfaction surged through her as she scooped the cat into a tight, gleeful hug. He shot a taunting grin and blurted that she was hugging Nick and that he was Daichi. The main character flashed a grin, and a baffled Alicia felt a hot blush flood her cheeks. She spun away from Daichi, cheeks aflame. The guy asked if she'd leave with the cat cradled in her arms, and shyly Alicia answered yes. Deciding to play a joke, he leaned in, grinning, and pretended he couldn't hear her. Caught off guard, Alicia shrieked, told them to go, and repeated Daichi's name in a flush of embarrassment. The boy fixed a cold, downward stare on bewildered Alicia as Nick's fury erupted. Silence smothered the merchant caravan's camp. Seated at the table in his tent, Klaus leaned in and pressed Lloyd for his opinion of Daichi. The assistant snapped his verdict. This guy spoke their tongue like one of them, not a passerby. Polite, hands pristine as if he'd never lifted a tool, clearly raised with money and schooling. The company head's gaze snapped to the pepper on the plate, and he demanded an opinion. Lloyd snapped to the conclusion that the spice had been handed over as a thank you, and Daichi is either the pampered son of a rich merchant or the stupidest son of an aristocrat. Klaus's instincts screamed that this guy could turn into a future big shot. The product was preserved like a museum piece. He knew Daichi had to be running a storage facility. Storage was a rare, God-bestowed skill. Its owner could lock things away for ages because time stopped inside, and how much it held depended on the owner's magic power. A magic bag is an enchanted sack whose interior swells beyond its outward size, but still has fixed limits, ignores its owner's power, and refuses to pause time for anything kept inside. Klaus's blood froze as he caught Daichi faking the retrieval of the goods from the magic bag, while Klaus himself had swum across the sea carrying the storage, and the older man scoffed that the kid was clearly still green. The company head barked, "Open the vault, find out if any valuables are stashed inside." First, they demanded to know everything about the country the guy came from. Lloyd asked if he should stop taunting Daichi, and Klaus shot back, "No." The company head snapped at his assistant, "Warn every guard and employee to be polite to Daichi too, not just to people from the company." A tired yawn ripped from Nick as he melted into Alicia's arms. Karina, Daichi, and Alicia strode around the camp. One camper brandished an expensive glass, holding it up for the other to inspect. The novice merchant noticed this and thought, "It's only a mid-grade glass, but in this world, even a simple glass cup fetches a king's ransom. Someone fired Karina's first name into the air. It was little Korat. She pleaded with the guard to spark her fire. Karina apologized, but Korat shook her head. She couldn't help, she had to escort Daichi. He blinked in disbelief and blurted that maybe Karina just ignites it with magic. Curiosity blazing, Daichi blurted he wanted to watch Karina make a fire. Karina smiled and said she'd do it if that's what he wanted. Karina leaned into the stove's glow, Korat's gratitude bursting out as she thanked the girl for agreeing to help. The escort scoffed that making a fire with flint was no easy feat, and the girl extended her hand. Flames erupted instantly. Daichi's jaw dropped at the sight, awe crashing over him as he recognized it for what it was: spiritual magic. Nick unleashed attack magic that blew him away, but seeing magic woven into everyday life stunned him even more. Daichi leaned in, asking Karina if she was always the one sparking the fire. The maintainer shrugged and said she only pitches in when she's not busy. He insisted that anyone who couldn't command fire magic should extract it with flint. Alicia shot him down, pointing out that those not proficient in fire but skilled in other magics can just use fire artifacts. Daichi shot a question. Can anyone use a magic item regardless of its element so long as it actually has magic? Alicia confirmed, then said there was more. She snapped that a person's mastery of magic hinges on the jobs they can pull off, and employers snap up the magically gifted while those without are passed over. Born without magic, people couldn't operate modern facilities and scrape together a meager living. Daichi felt it in his bones as memories of his homeland crashed over him. His grandfather had died and there was no job. He felt memories slam into him. Unpleasant people, bad news, and the blunt, relentless hardships of life. He reached a crushing conclusion that the quality of life depends on magic. And Karina snapped her gaze to Daichi, eyes cold and accusing. He snapped his head, and only then did he lock eyes with Kore, standing right beside him. His heart lurched. He'd just blurted it out loud. The main character dropped to his knees and poured out a desperate apology to the girl. Carrot nodded and took the apology without flinching. She'd long since grown used to it. The girl said that, though she has no magic, she works at a tight-knit company bound by kindness, where everyone leaps in to help each other. She knows down to her bones that luck has chosen her. Daichi swallowed his doubts and treated her words like an unbreakable vow. He realized his ability could make him a merchant, but it exploded into a selfish, ruinous mistake. He stared at his palm as power thrummed beneath his skin. This gift let him help people born without magic. He vowed to rip this world's foundations apart. Daichi figured non-magical people could thrive just like mages, and he knew if he spread everyday goods and practical know-how, they'd treat him well. He knew it was just his imagination, but a blazing resolve flared inside him. He whirled to Kore, thrust a lighter into her hand and christened it a fire-making artifact. He snatched up the device, showed exactly how it worked, and jaws dropped around the room. Karina gaped. She'd never laid eyes on a magic artifact so tiny. Alicia snapped that it didn't look magical, and the attendant pointed out it was transparent like a gem. Core degreed gleamed like a flawless gemstone. Daichi dubbed the object a lighter and thrust it into the girl's hand. She snapped, flat out refusing a gift that expensive, as the lighter started to slip from the guy's fingers. She smashed into the earth and stayed intact, leaving the girls staring in stunned silence. He laughed, waved away her worry, and swore the artifact was sturdy. If she breaks even too, he still won't be angry. He snapped at Korit to stop worrying and to flick the lighter. She grabbed a fistful of dried herbs, sparked them with the artifact, and wedged the blazing bundle into the firewood to set the pile alight. Flames leapt across the logs, and Korit's jaw hit the floor. He couldn't believe an artifact like this existed, and blurted that Daichi's homeland must be extraordinary. He proclaimed that ordinary people without magic in this country should be able to wield magical artifacts, and the girl snapped. "Are you a foreign merchant?" A confident smile lit her face as she declared that, armed with those incredible tools, he'd be unstoppable. Carrot shot Daichi a quick thanks and slid the lighter back into his hand. The man insisted Daichi should thank the girl for speaking up, apologized for disrupting her work, and told her she could keep the artifact. He spun to rejoin his escort, but Kore, blindsided by the novice merchant's choice, barked for them to halt. She recoiled from the pricey gift and refused it outright, while the protagonist rushed in to insist it wasn't that expensive. A voice snapped, "Karina, what are you doing here?" The applicant revealed herself as the escort's leader, declared she'd come to see him, and Daichi gaped at the man's colossal size. Karina thrust Captain Jeffrey at the main character, billing him as Bertram's business partner, then spun to Daichi and proclaimed Jeffrey the escort captain. To honor their new acquaintance, he thrust out his hand and vowed he'd stay by their side until they reached the next city. Jeffrey marched up, locked the main character in his stare, and declared his name face to face. Karina leaned in and told the captain that Chief Bertram had insisted they shadow Daichi closely. Jeffrey pressed his subordinate until the defender finally confirmed. Karina was escorting Alicia and Daichi. Rage boiled in him when he'd been told Karina was babysitting these two. It was almost certainly done on purpose. And Jeffrey asked Mr. Asakura to come with him. They surged forward. The captain thrust a drink at Daichi, and Daichi waved it off, while behind them the guys abandoned a bewildered correspondent. The guy finally devoured the meal. The main character lay sprawled in his tent, his cat curled into a tight ball on his stomach. Daichi's fingers raked through his pet's fur as he laughed, recalling how everyone gawked at that plastic lighter and even compared it to a gemstone. Worry surged. Had he overdone it? Forbidden to even guess, he was summoned. Karina burst in, breathless and apologizing for disturbing me so late, and blurted that the head of the company demands to meet a novice merchant. Daichi agreed to go to the meeting. He shoved the watch he'd just checked into hiding, his gut nodding with the fear that trouble was coming. He burst outside with Karina at his side and found the campsite buzzing with life. People stared at Daichi and he froze, bewilderment etched across his face. Karina tugged him into the tent where Alicia was already planted at the table and Klaus hovered at her side, sweeping an empty chair toward him. The company head slid into the chair and apologized for disturbing him at such a late hour. Daichi cut straight to the chase. What's wrong, and if anything's off, I can exchange the goods. Klaus slammed the offer down, because the product was dazzlingly excellent, and the main character stepped forward to cut through the confusion and demand answers. Plot twist. Bertram was desperate to talk about the lighter. The boy's eyes locked on it, the very item he'd given Corey. Klaus snapped, I didn't take it from her. She'd come only to consult about a magical artifact she'd never even laid eyes on. The trading house's head bore into the novice merchant with a razor stare and demanded, Do you grasp this item's true worth? The question slammed into Daichi. Sure, he'd thought about selling the lighter, but only as a humble relic for household chores. Klaus leaned in and said, This artifact is for aristocrats and the ultra-rich. Worthless back in Daichi, but here it fetches a king's ransom. The guy fired off, Is the lighter just a simple artifact? And the head of the trading company shook his head. He thundered that because even non-magic folks can wield it. It's worth far more than any ordinary magic tool. But the lighter's housing is flawed. It could fetch the price of plain glass, or, get this, the price of jewelry. Those words slammed into him, and he flashed back to the other day when he'd spotted two people locked in a fierce argument over an expensive glass. Klaus peeled back the case's layers and warned that once those items hit the market, opportunists would swarm, peddling them to aristocrats and the wealthy. Dread slammed into Daichi. If that happened, he could be in serious trouble. The rookie trader swallowed and owned up that he'd never even thought about it. The company head vowed to help him, then leaned in and demanded, So what's your move now? He clenched his jaw. This answer would sue Klaus. He schemed to protect and sell himself, and swallowed the brutal truth that he couldn't shake the foundations of this world. The novice merchant zeroed in on the glass goblet again, a sudden plan detonating in his head, and he blurted that he'd already tried hawking it to aristocrats and the rich. Daichi yanked a glass rose from his coat and held it aloft before Klaus and Alicia. Her breath hitched at the item's beauty, and even the head of the company roared in stunned disbelief. Doubt ripped through him again. Had he overdone it? Klaus spotted something. He bellowed for them to stop and take their time. Alicia shrieked in fright, and Daichi, baffled, had no idea why. He hadn't even noticed the blade near his neck. Only when his eyes fell did he catch sight of Karina's sword, its blade leveled at his throat. Klaus thrust out a hand and assured the maintainer there was nothing wrong. He'd only been taken aback. She freed her blade from Daichi's neck, slid it into its sheath, and excused herself. The head of the trading company burned with embarrassment and forced out an apology for raising his voice. Karina's warning hit him like a bolt, twisting his gut. Did the 1 meter condition even hold when the escort was already inside the tent the instant they arrived? Daichi snapped at Klaus that everything was fine. Karina was just guarding them. The old man gaped as the main character stood stone still with a sword aimed at him. The guy said he just knew Karina wouldn't hurt him. Daichi stood frozen, clueless about what had just happened and hadn't even spotted the blade at first. Best to keep the others in the dark. The company head pressed to keep the conversation alive. The protagonist demanded Karina join now, and the man recoiled, terror gripping him at the thought of it happening again. Klaus relented. Daichi wanted it. The company head barked that Karina must relocate. She squared her shoulders, nodded, and accepted the order. He cracked his knuckles and dove back into business. The novice merchant blurted that the rose was a delicate sculpture of glass. Its beauty crushes every jewel into insignificance. Klaus blinked in disbelief. This couldn't be the same glass he'd always known. Side by side with Alicia, they drank in Rose's breathtaking beauty. Daichi plucked a few more things from his bag and laid them on the table, lighters glinting beside delicate glass figurines. The head of the company stood spellbound by the object's beauty, noticing each one pulsed with its own uncanny glow. Klaus's eyes snapped. These lighters' bodies were nothing like the Daichi master's glass, yet greedy sellers still slapped sky-high price tags on them. The rookie trader declared he'd wipe out his money troubles by turning glass objects into cold, hard profit. He baited customers by throwing in free lighters with every main purchase. The main character resolved to gift a lighter for free as a practical everyday relic, then splurged on an expensive glass object to later hand out lighters to the wealthy. The company head leaned forward, eyes locked, and fired. "Do I have this right? Daichi's going to distribute lighters on the market?" Klaus scoffed at the plan, but with no other choice, he swallowed his doubts and agreed to play the clumsy novice merchant at every turn. Daichi leaned in, eyes razor-sharp, and demanded, "So he's willing to cooperate with me?" The company head signed off with a curt nod. The man beamed, thanked him, and thrust out his hand for a firm handshake. Klaus and Daichi locked hands. This handshake ignited the novice trader's very first step. Karina and Alicia burst from the tent and wove through the camp as the escort hurriedly apologized for that act. And Alicia squeezed her friend's hand and assured her everything was fine. Daichi leapt to Karina's defense, admitting he was the one who blindsided Klaus, insisting the girl was simply doing her job and demanding Klaus apologize. Alicia flared, ready to argue, then swallowed her words. An awkward hush settled over the three, and it grated on Daichi. Deciding to shatter the tension, he swung to Alicia and distracted her with a mischievous cat, scooping Nick into his arms as the kitten's front paws brushed Alicia's cheeks. Daichi smirked. The cat would chase her sadness away, and it was laughably easy. He blurted it straight to Alicia. He liked her better when she smiled. Crimson flamed her cheeks as she flashed a shy, crooked smile and dared, "Is this the smile you wanted to see?" The main character blurted, breathless, that Alicia is shy and unbearably cute. The girl froze, confusion clouding her face. Karina, watching every second, squirmed as the conversation wrapped her in awkwardness. Daichi pivoted the topic and fired at the girls. "Why's the whole camp staring at me?" Karina spat that all this chaos began the instant the main character slipped Karat a lighter. He snapped, "So this means others are after the same artifact too?" The escort admitted it could happen, but insisted people only crave a chance to see who Daichi really is and to talk to him. Karina burst into an explanation, laying bare how the campfolk ran through every theory about where the novice trader came from and why he'd come. Having heard every version, Daichi ribbed the maintainer, teasing she had a sharp take. The girl snapped back to correct him. The campers brimmed with imagination, and Alicia spotted something. A commotion ripped through the distance as people burst from the forest, screaming for help and shouting that monsters were chasing them. Daichi, Karina, and Alicia snapped to attention, every muscle tensing. One of the fleeing men screamed, warning that a pack of king apes was barreling toward Alger. Karina surged forward and barked for Alicia and Daichi to take cover behind her. Madness lit the king ape's eyes bone white, cutting through the darkness. The escort gripped her sword, blade poised to strike at the first sign of danger. The fleeing crowd howled king monkeys at the top of their lungs, and the whole camp heard every word. The captain barked, "Everyone, snap into intercept formation now!" The escort slammed into formation, bracing for battle as the escapees crumpled to the ground. The defenders bristled with weapons. They locked shields high and leveled their spears. Daichi watched it all. He spun to the girls and demanded who these royal monkeys were. Karina snapped that they're huge ape-like monsters, so cunning they hunt in coordinated packs and blisteringly fast. He hurled the question at the escort. Will you join the defense line? And she fired back that right now her duty was to protect him and Alicia. Daichi vowed she didn't need to worry about him and urged Karina to focus on protecting Alicia. Karina refused to abandon her task and snapped at him to stay out of her way. The escort whipped around to Alicia, snapping that she could use non-elemental magic and insisting the sorceress beef up her physical strength and sharpen her stealth. Karina's words slammed into him, and he finally grasped exactly what kind of magic non-elemental mages can wield. The protagonist schemed about stealth, claiming that if both of them tapped the same system, the enchantment would bind only to the item. Daichi's pulse hammered as he wondered if he could pull the same trick. Alicia hurled a warning. "The king monkeys are coming!" And the forest erupted with howls and heavy pounding. Monsters hurled themselves out of the forest. Shouts cracked through the air as the escort captain barked for the defenders to loosen their bowstrings. The archers unleashed a devastating hail of arrows at the beasts. The monkeys catapulted into the air, their powerful leaps launching them skyward. An arrow screamed toward them. Daichi's gut dropped as he saw the monkeys frozen midair, unable to dodge, their fate sealed. The archers unleashed volley after volley of arrows. He reeled in horror as his arrows ricocheted off the royal monkeys without leaving a scratch. The escort captain barked for the next group to unleash a barrage of magic attacks. The mages unleashed a relentless barrage of spells straight at the monsters. The attacks blasted the monkeys into frantic shrieks, and Alicia stood frozen, bewilderment burning in her eyes. The other king apes snarled, still itching to clash. A monkey barreled forward, its head slamming into a shield and stopping it cold. The monsters barreled into the shields and were thrown back. Daichi snapped, "Are the escorts all right?" Karina flashed a confident grin and declared they could withstand attacks of this level. Then her gaze snapped to something. A thunderous wave of king ape reinforcements flooded in from the south. The escort captain roared, rallying his men and declaring they were stronger than their foes. He hesitated, torn between staying a spectator and leaping in, his mind racing to find a way to help. He smothered his strength like a dying ember and asked Nick to slip into the shadows and not cast a single spell. Daichi froze over his inventory, indecision tearing at him. Alicia stared at the guy in stunned disbelief because she couldn't see his screen, and Karina snapped, "That's strange." Suspicion ignited among the escorts when the royal monkeys erupted into frenzied non-stop antics. The escort snapped at Alicia, ordering her to scour the forest's southern edge to see if they were hiding there. Daichi felt a cold prickle crawl up his spine and ripped his gaze away. Alicia snapped her eyes shut and poured every ounce of focus into her spell as the main character peered toward the forest and spotted the royal monkeys closing in. He screamed a warning to Karina. Monkeys were storming out of the eastern fields. The monsters streaked in a blur and panic slammed into him as he thought frantically that he needed a weapon, right now. What are the monkeys zeroing in on, Daichi? Karina shot to the monster's side in an instant. She swung her sword up and hurled the attack aside. The other two monkeys bolted the opposite way, and both the maintainer and the guy saw them streak away. Now the monsters zeroed in on Alicia. Daichi's heart hammered. He feared for the girl. He blasted off the ground with no idea how, his foot whistling straight for the attacking monkey's face. The monster's gaze snapped to the main character. Too late. Daichi's fist slammed into the monkey's lower jaw. The monster rocketed sideways, still cartwheeling from the impact. The second monkey snapped its head toward the main character. He lunged and headbutted her square in the face. The monkey went limp, knocked unconscious and launched away by the sheer force of the blow. Karina and Alicia gaped as his own strength betrayed him, sending him skidding across the ground, his body dragged by raw inertia. Daichi crumpled to the ground. The sorceress and her attendant lunged forward, alarm flaring as they scrambled to check the merchant's condition. He forced his head up, still sprawled on the ground, swiveled to Alicia and blurted, "Are you hurt?" The girls hauled Daichi to his feet. Then the three of them sprinted forward to take charge of the scene. Two more monkeys pounced from behind. Karina and the main character felt it and whipped around. Daichi and the attendant charged into battle against the monsters. Karina drove stabbing blows with her sword, while the guy unleashed brutal kicks. Alicia hung at the edge, glued to their fierce clash, and right behind her, a lone king ape loomed. The sorceress didn't notice the monster looming at her back at first. Then a cold prickle raced down her spine, and she slid her gaze away without moving a muscle. Panic detonated in her chest the instant she saw the monster's maw gaping at her. Daichi bolted to help. A sudden blur Karina caught from the corner of her eye. He gritted his teeth and absorbed the royal monkey's blow himself. Alicia's heart slammed against her ribs, terror for Daichi choking her. Karina's hands trembled, worry sketched across her face. The monster latched onto his shoulder like a leash, dragging the breath from him, but he planted his feet and refused to quit, though a cold fear whispered he could die if the tide didn't turn. He clenched his jaw and forced himself to believe he wasn't hurting. And, impossibly, Daichi truly felt no pain either. The king monkey clung to the guy's shoulder, eyes blazing with bafflement that it couldn't buy through it. It hit him like a thunderclap. Earlier, Karina and Alicia had been talking about non-elemental magic. Magic that used no elements or improvised tricks, and suddenly he knew. This had to be it. He relived the encounter with the colossal tiger, watching each predatory movement play out in brutal slow motion. Daichi seized his advantage, yanked a knife from his belt, and the blade erupted in a pulsing aura. The merchant plunged a dagger into the king monkey's back. He stared at the aftermath and realized his strike went in like a fork through cake. Brute strength and silent stealth were devastating. Deity's gaze snapped to Karina as she fought the monkey. He shoved the attendant aside and roared, "Leave the monster on me!" The main character sprang, slamming his heel into the king monkey's back once more. Daichi melted into the shadows as the monster unleashed a thunderous roar of rage and pain. The guy's knife was hopelessly tiny. He couldn't reach the monkey's heart, and the monster swelled like it was about to explode. Our hero seethed. The knife tore free from the wound. Daichi, blindsided, plunged into a stomach-dropping freefall as the monkey grinned, reveling in the main character's failure. He wasn't disappointed either. A sly grin split his face. Karina struck with cold confidence and razor focus, driving her longsword clean through the king ape and leaving him stunned. The monkey crumpled, defeated, and the escort sprayed blood as he unleashed a barrage of slicing blows. Blood streaked Karina's face. Taichi's breath hitched. He found that bloodied image of her utterly irresistible. He crashed back onto the ground, and Alicia and Karina tore over to him, worry carved into their faces. The main character snapped, "Are the girls hurt?" And Nick's head popped out from under his t-shirt. The chaperone fired back that she should be the one asking, and the sorceress sneered that Daichi should have taken better care of herself. The girls hauled him to his feet, and he snapped a sharp question about the defense line's condition. Karina burst onto the comms, breathless. "Enemy numbers are collapsing! Keep this up and we win!" The main character stepped forward and offered to bolster the defenders. The chaperone snapped at me again, insisting her job was to protect Alicia and Daichi. A hard frown cut her face as the memory slammed into her. The novice merchant lunging between the sorceress and the king ape's savage assault. Karina clenched her sheathed sword until her knuckles went white, and felt a tight coil of tension snap into focus. The girl said the monkey's plan to smash through their defenses had fallen apart. Morale was collapsing, so they'd soon retreat, and he asked, incredulous, if the king monkeys were really that cunning. The answer hit Daichi when he looked at the shield monsters and watched them break ranks, pouring back into the forest. Karina, blood wiped clean from her face, kept turning to the guy again and again, snapping, "Did the novice trader buy what I said?" He brushes aside her words, fixated on how the escort, her face wiped clean of blood, looks even cuter. Daichi stared at his blood-slick hands, then shoved his arm into his jacket's inside pocket and yanked out a small, rolled-up towel. Alicia snapped, "Hand me this towel!" The sorceress plunged the cloth into the water, then twisted it hard until every last drop squeezed free. She reached up and wiped Daichi's face. He snapped, teeth chattering, that he was freezing and could have cleaned himself. Alicia insisted on helping, making her thanks a deed instead of empty words. He finally relented and let her step in. She rubbed a wet towel over both his cheeks, and a pleased grin spread across his face. Daichi locked eyes with the sorceress, voice razor sharp. "Are you using spiritual water magic?" Alicia's puzzled stare jolted him, so he barreled in and asked if he'd said something wrong. Her jaw dropped. The merchant already knew she could wield spiritual water magic. Daichi froze, bewilderment blazing in his eyes, while the sorceress hesitated, hunting for the right words to lay everything bare to him. Alicia unleashed a torrent of arcane truths on the main character, explaining how magic operates, the ranks of its types, which powers dominate, and the inner workings of enchanted artifacts. From her words, the guy snapped to the conclusion that there are 4 elements, and that spiritual magic overpowers artifacts. Disbelief ripped through the sorceress. How had the merchant pierced the veil of her spiritual magic? Daichi's mind raced, crafting the perfect lie, and he choked out, "I was just being polite." He declared that back home spiritual magic reigns supreme over mere artifacts, so he reached the verdict. Calling it an artifact would be rude, since artifacts aren't prized there. That's why the main character bellowed, "It's spiritual magic!" Alicia and Karina fixed Daichi with cutting, unblinking glares. His face flamed crimson with embarrassment. The escort dropped the bomb. Only 20 people in their country can wield spiritual magic, and across the whole continent there are roughly 100. The guy scoffed, convinced they weren't nearly enough. The sorcerers let out a soft, contemptuous chuckle and told the novice merchant he'd better learn their country before he dared to set up shop here. He flashed a grin and declared he'd devour every detail they told him as they hit the road. The girls rallied to help Daichi, and he lit up, thanking them with a relieved, grateful grin. Grateful, he tried to hawk 2 figurines modeled after Alicia and Karina, but the girls flat out refused. The escort's warriors roared with triumph. Daichi eagerly asked to go to the defender's place, and Karina warned there might be wounded there the main character could help. He demanded why the royal monkeys had attacked. The attendant shrugged, flung out a few shaky guesses, and pointed him to the people sprinting from the monsters. He ripped 2 cold truths from his doubts. First, spiritual magic was vanishingly rare in this world. Second, if Daichi could command his elemental power, he could call forth Nick's spiritual magic. If anyone uncovers his exchange ability, trouble will explode. He has to wield it like a live grenade, only when the stakes demand it. The boy cracked a rueful smile. Surviving proved brutal, even with cheat skills. Alicia's mind snapped to the moment when a battered Daichi jabbed a finger skyward and insisted everything was fine. Her cheeks flamed crimson as she snapped, "You're such a funny guy." The sorceress deduced the merchant's heartbeat with kindness. She'd never heard of anyone toppling a king ape with nothing but their bare hands. Alicia rewound that heartbeat in her mind. The main character flung himself over her, burying her beneath his body to shield her. Confusion ripped through her. She couldn't fathom what had driven Daichi to do that. She couldn't fathom why he grinned as danger closed in. You can't take down the king monkey with one punch. But Alicia's memories snapped alive as her grandmother's tales about the hero told to her when she was a child flooded back. She plunged her head into the blanket, letting the fabric swallow her whole. She shook her head violently, the word no tearing from her again and again. Alicia realized Daichi felt no fear of her. When he discovered she wielded spiritual magic, he didn't bat an eye or shift his steady, unbothered stance toward her. She remembered the sting of people's judgment, and then his warm smile sliced through the ache. She froze, confusion sparking like static behind her eyes. She burrowed into this blanket, folding herself into a tight cocoon like a caterpillar. Karina seethed, equal parts fury and disbelief, when the aspiring merchant coolly corrected her. He didn't lack the skill. He'd simply never once actually mounted a horse. The main character vaulted into the carriage with Karina and Alicia, flinching at every jolt, but the attendant insisted it was the best carriage they could get. The main character peered out the carriage window as the accompanying warriors snapped their heads away from Daichi. His chest tightened as everyone recoiled from his gaze. Karina shrugged like it was nothing, and he couldn't remember when he'd become someone who terrified people. The escort blurted that it went down last night, smack in the middle of everyone arguing about what to eat. Karina snapped that even though talk of the lighter had died down, a reason for misunderstanding still smoldered. Realization hit like a punch. This was Daichi's tent. An eerie, otherworldly light erupted from it, and he shrugged, insisting that in his homeland such a sight was perfectly ordinary. Karina barked that if Daichi flaunted wares from his homeland again, he'd have to alert them and the main merchant first. He dropped to his knees, apologized, and swore he remembered every last detail. Curiosity gnawed at Alicia. She leaned in and asked them to show her the products they were talking about. He grinned, flung the tent flap wide, and invited them inside if they were curious. She flushed crimson, mortification snapping through her at that suggestion. A punch of horror knocks the breath out of him as he realizes what he blurted. Alicia is underage. Daichi apologized, snatched his words back, and insisted the sorceress was far too young. Alicia's shoulders slumped at being called too small. Karina spun on the guy and snapped, "That's rude." The bombshell hit. The sorceress was 20 years old. Shock tore through him as Karina announced she was 19 and that both of them were older than him. Daichi erupted, roaring his denial and ripping the claim to shreds. He was 22. The chaperone shrugged, utterly unmoved, and the sorceress cackled. Kids these days sprint toward adulthood like it's a race. Daichi seethed when the girls pegged him as 16 or 17. Karina smirked and teased him, calling that a compliment. Alicia winced and apologized. He blurted out the wrong ages for the girls right away, and the escort swooped in, offering to shut the whole conversation down. An escort on horseback thundered across the open, hooves flattening the earth, and Daichi pressed to the window as a sudden movement snagged his gaze. His eyes slammed onto an open cart barreling by. Men bound inside. Karina caught his stare and barked, "They mustn't pity them," and Daichi recoiled. This was cruel. 35 of them plunged into the forest to snatch the baby king monkeys. Only 5 adventurers staggered out alive. He blurted out why they even needed baby monkeys. Alicia snapped, "They're for that exact purpose," and Karina cut in that the army uses them too. The escort growled that captured royal monkeys are shoved into slave collars. The main character recoiled, a cold dread knotting in their chest. Daichi blurted out, if baby monkeys were expensive. Karina rattled off the prices, and the skills exchange rate pegged 1 gold coin at 1,000,000 yen. He pressed his questions like a blade, demanding to know if those adventurers were criminals, and the escort hesitated, calling it a delicate matter before warning they'd have to answer for yesterday's battle. A crushing fine will slam them, can't pay it, and debt will drag them into slavery. Daichi counted his losses and declared adventuring a money pit. Karina suddenly burst onto the scene as a daring adventurer. He dropped his head and apologized, and she grinned, saying, "Work steadily, and this business pays off handsomely." Luck betrayed the adventurers in the carriage. 2 herds crashed into them at once, and Alicia snarled they'd done no proper research. From what they said, it hit him. Those adventurers hadn't even bothered to check if their teammates were still alive. Daichi blurted, "The world is tough!" And Alicia and Karina froze, speechless and at a loss. The main character learned that rushing up to a girl with physical magic reads as flat-out rude. He came to a hard truth. This country's culture and customs were nothing like his own. Alicia's chest swelled with gratitude at the guy's efforts, and Karina snapped at the sorceress, warning her not to shower him with praise. Daichi volunteered to take a break and dug into the bag Klaus had handed him. He whipped out water and sandwiches snugly wrapped in plastic. He thrust the snacks forward with a grin, urging the girls to dig in. Daichi set down a steaming spread of Japanese dishes and beckoned them to taste. He pressed the girls for brutal honesty. He wanted their opinion. The company head shoved a bag into the main character's hands to hide his storage. The guy pulled fresh food straight from his inventory. Daichi snatched his snack and ripped at the wrapper to start eating. But before it came free, he froze and shouted at the sight looming ahead. The main character's eyes snapped to the screen. They closed in on Takura, the village looming ahead. He craned his neck, desperate to catch sight of her, but from where he sat, nothing came into view. Daichi's stomach roared. He made up his mind. He needed lunch, and soon. He leaned in and insisted a plastic water bottle was a vessel cloaked in a special, clear, sandwich-like wrapping, something he only shows to a few. Karina said it soothed the storm inside her. The main character couldn't fathom why, but still managed a grateful thank you to the girl. With an hour of rest ahead, Daichi couldn't sit still and rallied everyone into a brisk walk around the village outskirts. Alicia threw her full weight behind the idea. The escort didn't flinch, but first she urged them to eat in the carriage and insisted on scouting the village to see what it looked like. After lunch, they plunged into the village center instead of the outskirts. The place sprawled wide, and Karina insisted a novice merchant must immerse themselves in its cultures, not just admire the scenery. "You can even snag shoes and clothes there," the escort tossed out, his gaze snapping to Daichi. Comprehension slammed into him. He was a flare, impossible to ignore. He threw his weight behind Karina's plan, looked to Alicia, and asked if she'd mirror them. The sorceress shrugged and said she didn't mind. The guard clapped a hand to her chest and thanked Daichi, relief flooding her now that they'd reached their destination, while the guy went beet red, mortified by Karina's reaction. He pivoted the conversation back and fired, "How long will the maintainer be away?" Karina figured she'd be back in 15 to 20 minutes, tops. Daichi dragged Alicia into the carriage and planted himself beside her, ready to wait for the guard. The caravan slammed to a halt, kicking up a choking cloud of dust. The main character and the sorceress sat in the carriage as Nick vaulted off the seat. The cat leapt up to Alicia, and she burst into a squeal of pure delight. She dove into play with the cat. Nick lunged and seized the girl's hand. Daichi watched, eyes locked, as the sorceress kept toying with Nick and taunted that this time he wouldn't catch his hand. She shot forward, and Nick's hand scrambled to catch up. His paw ghosted across Alicia's wrist. The girl snapped into overdrive and surged forward. Nick sprinted after the source, his hand lunging to snatch it. Seeing Alicia blaze past, the guy's jaw dropped. He realized not only Nick, but the girl had grown terrifyingly stronger, and Daichi could hardly believe his eyes. The cat lunged at the hand, claws bared, and the sorceress snatched it into a crushing grip with both hands. Alicia scooped the cat into her arms and snapped at Nick. "Do you know how to use physical strength enhancement?" The cat's owner froze as realization hit him. His pet was exposed. He locked eyes with the girl, utterly serious, and begged her to bury what he'd seen, keep it a secret just between the two of them. Alicia fired the question again about what lay between them. She nodded fiercely and said, "If Daichi says so, then yes." They locked eyes, cheeks burning a fierce crimson. Daichi and Alicia echoed each other's names. Nick grunted. Then Karena stormed back in and ripped the moment to pieces. The sorceress hailed her escort. The main character blurted that Karena had barreled back. The defender leveled a cold stare at the guy. She declared they'd stay in the village for 2 days. Daichi's jaw dropped. The guy snapped, "Did anything happen?" Karena's voice cut through the chatter. The king monkeys had wreaked far more damage than they'd realized, and the caravan needed repairs. The carriage screeched to a dead stop, leaving the travelers no choice but to halt and rest here. For now. The escort offered to eat lunch, jabbing a finger toward Daimi's bag. He shoved a sandwich toward her and asked, "Do you want a sandwich?" The defender confirmed it. And as the main character stared at Karena's bright, happy smile, memories crashed back. Last night she stood with a sword slick with blood in her hands. He yanked the sandwiches and water bottles back out, again. The girls gaped at the bizarre dish, crowding forward and blurting, "How do we even eat this?" Daichi shrugged, grinning. "It's just bread. Bite in." And Karena gasped at how unbelievably soft it was. She sank her teeth into it. A grin ripped across the defender's face as he savored the taste. Karena announced to Alicia there were 2 whole slices of bread with meat jammed between them, and the sorceress also dared to try the foreign fare. She closed her eyes and savored the sandwich as bold flavors and a perfect crunch exploded across her tongue. Alicia's face lit up as every bite burst with flavor, and Karena's eyes widened when she spotted vegetables tucked inside. The guard devoured it with delight, so Daichi pressed another sandwich into her hands. The girl took it gratefully, thanked him, and beamed. Everything he'd been holding was wrenched from his grasp. He plunged his hand into his bag again. He swept out a platter of desserts, sliced fruit Karena recognized at a glance, and Alicia inhaled their sugary perfume. Nick urged me to eat, and Daichi started ripping food from the bag and pressing portions into Nick's hands, too. He set the food in the bowl, and the cat lunged forward, hungrily devouring it. Alicia reached to pet the cat when a paw suddenly shot up and batted her hand away. It hit her. Nick wanted no interruptions, and the sorceress cackled at the cat's antics. Karena sank her teeth into a Japanese fruit sandwich. The guard's eyes shot open as the flavor detonated on his tongue. Daichi leaned in, pressing the girl for her take on the dessert, and the escort peered at her hands, asking what she held. It was sweet and pillowy. The guy leaned in, grinned, and declared it whipped cream. Girls like it. Karenix raved it was irresistibly tasty and swore it would explode into popularity. He offered his companion supplements, and the girl pressed the novice trader. "Are you sure about this? Will it be too difficult for you?" Daichi stifled a laugh at Karena's flustered face, then called out, "You should try other cream desserts." The maintainer's grin split his face as he dove in to taste them. Karena's grin hit him like a thunderclap, and his heart clenched. The girls chomped into their sandwiches with giddy grins, and Daichi beamed, relief roaring in his chest to see them enjoying it. Every last scrap of food had vanished. The guard panicked about whether it had been expensive, and the main character flashed a roguish grin and teased, "Do I look like someone who cares about money?" Karena froze, bewilderment written across her face, while Daichi erupted into triumphant laughter, drunk on his victory. Memories of lonely dinners back home crashed over him. Dachu's smile spread like sunrise, warm and steady. He plunged his hand into his bag. He whipped out slices of cake and slid one toward the girls. Laughter crackled in the carriage as they sat shoulder to shoulder, trading stories and smiles while the countryside rushed past. Klaus exploded. "Did I hear that right? Daichi struck the king monkey in mid-flight?" Karina's mind screamed no way, but the truth hit her like a sledgehammer. The guard blurted to the head of the merchants that the guy had taken down 5 royal monkeys, and Klaus, incredulous, shot back. Did the girl really see it, or did she just imagine the whole thing? Karina swore she never once tore her eyes from him, even as the battle raged around them. Doubt clawed at Bertram, but he shoved it aside and trusted the guard. Her wind magic could sense movement even where sight couldn't. The escort snapped her report shut after laying bare what happened to Daichi the night the king apes attacked them, and Klaus's jaw clenched, every nerve taut. The head of the company felt it in his bones. Karina would shatter beneath the monster's fangs. The guard barked that Daichi had used a knife, but with a sword he'd have cut down 4 monkeys. Klaus's stomach dropped. If that was true, there wasn't a single soul on this continent who could match the kid's mastery of non-elemental magic. Karina nodded with the company head, but cold suspicion simmered under her calm. The Garg hissed its assessment at her, and Daichi couldn't wrest control of his sword or his own body. He had no combat experience, but a fiercer power churned beneath the surface. He was capable of far more. Klaus snapped. "So the kid's only good at his magic?" And Tarina froze, words dying on her lips. The head of the trading company sized him up and concluded, "Daichi's a newcomer to trading, but his knowledge already matches real-world practice." The attendant blurted a wild theory. The aspiring merchant might actually be a noble from another continent. Klaus snapped. If that's the case, it would explain a lot. Karina demanded to know what the company head would order her to do, then bristled at the novice merchant's strength. Something about it set off alarms in her gut. At Asakura's bidding, the merchant chief swore to hide Daichi's foreign roots, and Bertram saw Daichi as their linchpin. The main character didn't just pull Alicia to safety, they also keep their company running. Karina knew all this. Klaus barked at the guard to keep shadowing the boy. In Karam, the locals could easily misread where he came from. The protector snapped to attention and accepted the order. Admiration surged in her chest. Daichi looked every bit like a hero. She thought of the beaming young man balancing saucers of cake in his hands, and a grin spread across her face. Karina barreled back to the carriage with Asakura and Alicia at her side. Then the trio burst into a clothing store. He rocked local garb, spun toward the girls with a grin, and asked how he looked in his new clothes. Karina sized him up and spat out her verdict. The young man looked every bit a traveler. Nick meowed. Daichi stared at his reflection, pulse thudding. Did the clothes make him look good? Alicia snapped them the aspiring merchant had been sporting foreign clothes the whole time, inviting unwanted attention. Karina backed the sorceress. What mattered was that the outfit blended with the local environment. The young man asked if he should go for a restrained yet stylish look. The defender fixed him with a hard stare and snapped, "Travelers don't wear that and Daichi can't stand out." The novice trader bowed and accepted his position. He sneered that the escort got sweeter when munching gummy treats, and a sharp elbow jabbed into his back. The young man zeroed in and plucked the clothes he liked. He whirled to the older saleswoman, flashed a cocky grin, called her little sister, and snapped that he'd be taking the clothes he'd chosen. Crimson flooded the saleswoman's cheeks when someone actually called her young. He fawned over her, swearing she was only 4 years his senior, no more. And the salesman laughed, saying she had a daughter about Daichi's age. He poured on the flattery, claiming he'd mistake mother and daughter for sisters. The praise hit home and the saleswoman smiled, slashing a discount for Daichi. Abacuses lined the counter. The guy locked eyes with Karina, his look asking if he'd done everything right, and Karina nodded, a clear, positive yes. The novice merchant plunged his hand into his bag, still calling the saleswoman little sister, and asked if he could pay with this instead of silver coins. He whipped out a high-grade silver plate. The saleswoman froze in confusion. Karina's fury ignited, and Alicia gaped in pure amazement. The escort lunged forward, planting himself squarely in front of the young man and barked, "Wait!" Karina slammed her card down and paid for Daichi's purchases herself. She swept them out of the store, and the bewildered saleswoman called after them to come again. The 3 of them huddled outside the store. The escort snarled at the foreigner, shouting him down for what he'd done. The young man protested, insisting he only wanted to pay with silver. Karina kneaded her eyebrows to quiet her nerves, then swallowed and owned it. It was her fault. She should have asked for clarification. Daichi insisted we head to the next store. The protector blocked his path, planted herself between them and the road, and demanded they go no further. First, they had to see the head of the Bertram Company. The young man flashed a grin and offered no resistance. Karina wrenched Asakura up by the scruff of his neck and shoved him in front of Klaus. Daichi squared up before the merchant boss as the man barked, "Why did the boy do it?" Daichi only wanted to pay. Karina, the boy, and Klaus huddled inside the tent while outside Alicia frolicked with Nick. Bertram jabbed at the gleaming silver bar and barked, "You're paying with this, Daichi?" Silver coins were nowhere to be found on this continent. Back home they paid with plates like these, so he was dumbfounded that a silver plate wouldn't settle the bill. Klaus gaped, stunned that the main character had somehow never learned about the coins until they met. Didi shrugged and said the reason for his blind spot was simple. Everything he needed sat in storage, so he'd never had to spend a single coin. The company head nodded coldly, bought the young man's explanation, and declared he had no local money, and that's exactly why he needed them. He leaned in and asked Klaus if he'd buy something from him, and dumped the contents of his bag. Bertram clawed at his temples. Still, he shoved a pouch of coins into the young man's hand and hissed, "Be careful when you reach Karam." Klaus barked that Daichi must never show anyone anything from his homeland, searing into the boy that what's ordinary back home will look strange here. They walked through the village again when the young man pressed Karina. "Are you angry?" Karina, her face unmistakably furious, shot back that she shouldn't be angry. Asakura lunged forward, words tumbling out, a frantic apology for not consulting the chaperone, then a raw plea, "What can I do to cheer you up?" The defender refused, calm, collected, and totally unfazed. Daichi clenched his jaw and faced the truth. He'd set out to explore the world, and this mess was entirely his fault. He swore to Jarina he'd be careful next time. At last, the attendant snapped back, brushing it off. The guy knew nothing, so no harm done, and insisted he consult her next time and give her a heads up before doing anything. Daichi clenched his jaw and accepted Dorina's terms. Nick let out a single, pointed meow. The escort spun and strode to the cat. The girl melted. He'd come to apologize, and she declared she wasn't angry with Nick, only his master was to blame for everything. His mind seized on this protector's warning. "Don't get angry." Karina snapped her sword free and leveled the cold steel at terrified Daichi's temple. The nervous novice merchant thrust a parcel of sweets at Karina, desperate for forgiveness. The escort snapped, cheeks flushing crimson, demanding if Asakura truly wanted to bribe her. He lunged into an explanation. Back home, if you trouble a girl you love or even a close friend, you apologize by handing over chocolate. Daichi knew he'd just lied, but a reckless hope sparked in him. If it were true, the world would have no problems. Alicia clutched the chocolate bar in her palms and whispered the fragment about her favorite girl, or friend, her voice trembling into a question. Karina let the young man's words slice through her doubts. She nodded and reached out to take the sweets. The girls popped the candies into their mouths and their faces lit up as a burst of flavor blew them away. Daichi pressed another stash of candy into Karina and Alicia's hands. They flashed grateful smiles and thanked him for the bonus treats. He convinced himself it'd be a breeze, even as worry coiled in his gut. The aspiring merchant fell to his knees and apologized to Karina again. She forgave him only if he promised to be careful next time, and Daichi accepted. The trio, Karina, Alicia, and Daichi, plunged into the pulsing crush of a busy street. He gaped at the horde of adventurers before him. The sorceress exclaimed it was unbelievable because the village was tiny, and Karina recoiled, panic flaring at the sheer crush of people. Hostile stares drilled into him. The girl saw them too. Alicia's heart lurched. Dai was unarmed, and she dreaded people finding out the young man was working with the Bertram Company. Karina snapped that the novice merchant looked frail and was from another country, so everyone would single him out as a target. He snapped, "This isn't funny," but inside he couldn't stop thinking. Somehow he'd defeated the royal monkeys. A rookie merchant burned to step into the weapons shop. The escort raised no objection, only hurled a stern warning at the main character. "Don't chase adventures, keep your guard up." She urged Daichi to take care of himself. He swore she could trust him, and despite his rough exterior, he was quietly a peaceful, upstanding citizen. Karina exhaled a long sigh and said aloud she hoped the aspiring merchant hadn't strutted away from the monkey fight with his confidence blown sky high. As he spoke, the youth jabbed a finger and demanded, "Who's stronger, those who fight humans or the king ape?" The girls bristled at Daiichi's blunt question, and the guy shot back that it was a question of simple interest. Tarina snapped her verdict. In a one-on-one fight, the monkey will win. Adventurers band together, spring cunning traps and pull off slick tricks. They're only human after all. Daiichi urged us to drop the subject and sprint to the weapons store. The maintainer backed him. The three of them burst into a gun shop. The young man dove in, snatching up sword after sword with wide-eyed excitement. Karina cut him off, ordering him to grab the armor first. He slid into one set and blurted, "Is this the right equipment?" The swordswoman glared at Daiichi, fearing the chosen armor was too light. He shrugged. "Maybe so," he said, "but Nick won't be cramped." And Karina rolled her eyes, spotting how badly his priorities were skewed. Alicia's face softened into a grateful smile as she called Daiichi's concern for her pet kind, and he went slack-jawed, bewildered, blurting, "You really think that?" "The source risk proclaimed it," Karina snapped. "Enough shopping!" They already had the magic armor, so the crew flipped the plan and dove into buying and selling. Daiichi hefted a towering shield. The swordswoman shot a warning that such a behemoth clashes with armor, and the sorceress gaped, awed by the young man's iron stamina. Cool as ice, the main character hoisted 2 shields, and Karina barked at the guy to stop carrying them and stash them in storage so he wouldn't draw attention. A wild grin lit his face. At last it was his turn to choose a weapon. He hungered for a long sword ripped straight from a fantasy RPG. He strode to the rack of swords, and tucked among the blades waited a black-handled sword. Daiichi snatched it up, and Karina shot back. "Can the main character even wield a long sword?" The young man admitted he only wanted the weapon to intimidate. He'd just swing it, and the swordswoman seethed. That was not how it worked. Alicia rallied behind Asakura, shouting he was a natural with weapons. The attendant snapped that his skill existed only because of physical reinforcement and magic armor. He gripped the sword, eyes locked on the blade. Had the sword art's physical enhancement become stronger? A thrill hit him. Magic paid off, and whoever commanded it took the victory. Daiichi told himself that if he channeled magic into raw strength, he could rip through the soil and plow the field far faster than any ordinary person. Only the magically gifted could wield enchanted items. Ordinary people shoved every other trinket aside and walked on. A chasm ripped open between the magic wielders and the powerless, and everything spiraled into chaos. He burned to help ordinary people, even if only a little, and turned to selling his glass creations to the royal nobility and the wealthy. He swore to arm those who couldn't use magic with rock-bottom price, easy-to-use goods, a cheap, convenient alternative. Karina caught Daiichi staring into the distance and asked, "What's wrong?" He brushed it off, saying it was nothing. He was just thinking about his homeland. The trio darted down the village streets, checking out the other shops. Standing in the alley in front of Karina and Alicia, the novice merchant planted himself and unleashed a breathless rundown of everything he'd learned while shopping. Goblins kept swarming the outskirts of Takora village, so the Adventurers Guild dispatched 3 squads, 13 fighters in all, to hunt them down and wipe them out. Unofficially, 7 teams poured in, about 40 people in all. Karina snarled that humans swarmed them. The goblin count was a mystery, and anyone who went in would be painfully inexperienced. There had to be a reason they signed up. Nobody drags this many people along without a purpose. Daiichi shot a blunt question at the group. Are goblins really dangerous monsters? The chaperones pounced on it, rattling off goblin types, goblin mages, goblin generals. A sudden flood of hikers slammed into Karina and the main character, igniting fierce suspicion. She sized up the adventurers' gear as she passed and coldly dismissed them as E rank D at best. Most adventurers kick off at H rank, the apprentice's badge, and only the truly exceptional claw their way up to the legendary S rank. AA-ranked adventurers reigned as top-tier aristocrats, eclipsing earls and bearing the honor of a knight. Only those who pulled off legendary feats earned the S rank, and the king himself strode forward to pin it on their chests. The other 7 ranks, A through G, were nothing but basic markers. Karina snapped that those ranks meant nothing about raw strength or combat skill. Ranks were forged by merit, and D-rank adventurers and above were battle-hardened warriors who'd survived countless clashes throughout their lives. Daiichi discovered Karina owned a C rank, The details sailed over his head, so he anchored his trust in her. The swordswoman barked that she'd amassed a mountain of hard-won experience. He remembered crushing the tiger and toppling the king monkey, furious that his strength hadn't earned him a rank. He hadn't unleashed his full arsenal yet. He snapped the conversation back to adventurers and ripped into the mystery of why so many were leaving. The maintainer snapped, "It's not the whole story, but yes, that's the gist of it." Daichi and Alicia pressed their sorceress protector for her opinion, and she swore that if Karina told him, the young man would never pull another reckless stunt. Nick muttered under his breath. Alicia insisted he, too, was desperate to know. She leaned in too close to Daichi and his cat and blurted, "Did I understand Nick correctly?" The guy just thrust the cat into the sorceress's hands. The main character fired a barrage of questions at Karina, demanding answers about the adventurers who'd vanished. The adventurer pressed on, revealing that 2 months ago bandits had mercilessly slaughtered everyone in a village 4 days away, and Daichi recoiled at how anyone could wipe out an entire village. The novice trader hunched over the screens, devouring every scrap of available information for a breakthrough. Karina jabbered on while dozens of adventurers stormed the ruined village and came back without killing a single soul. Then a cold realization struck the main character like a thunderbolt. The feudal lord dangled half the bounty for anyone who wipes out the goblins near the settlement. If he abandons his post or the adventurers flee, the mission stays unfinished. Botch the feudal lord's task and it's not a fine they'll fret over. It's whether anyone will ever trust the adventurer again. Karina vowed that if they were to finish the task, she'd widen the search first, and the swordswoman herself plunged into the fray, cleaving through goblins and trying to destroy as many as she could. A flash of realization hit Daichi. Her words revealed the escort had concluded the adventurers and the bandits were from the same clan. That put the village squarely in the bandits' crosshairs, the perfect moment to strike back and settle the score. The main character's mind snapped to the gun tucked in his inventory. Curiosity tore through him. He bolted to check it out and called the girls to follow. Asakura burned to test a weapon from his homeland and pressed Karina to size up its power, handling, and stealth. Karina hissed that the moment 3 people spot it, it's impossible to ignore, then snapped, "Is that weapon supposed to be a joke?" Daichi and Karina slaughtered 5 king monkeys, and the main character snapped, "Is the goblin general's physical enhancement stronger than the king ape's same skill?" The swordswoman snapped, grim-faced. The goblin general outclassed the monkey. The main character snapped his hands into a quick shake. The young man demanded to know about the field, and Alicia shot back with a confident grin. If anything went wrong, the physical reinforcement would let them bolt out at a moment's notice. Turns out the source risk could wield physical strength, just a faint whisper of power, barely anything. She beamed at Daichi, contentment radiating from her while he went slack, completely at a loss. Karina agreed to the adventure, but with one ironclad demand: it must take place in the forest, away from prying eyes, and any physical reinforcement must strike only from a distance. The young man clenched his jaw and accepted those conditions. Just as he was about to head there, someone barreled into him. The stranger barreled over Daichi, snapping, "Take off your shoes." He couldn't fool himself. If this had gone down in Japan, he'd have bolted on the spot, but now he could take down the king monkey, and an escort flanked him. He shot back, insisting the insolent stranger had barreled into him. The brute's reply lit a white-hot rage inside him. The trio found themselves surrounded. Locals and patrons hunched over pints, jolted at the noise, and started whispering. Daichi froze, puzzlement written across his face. The crowd closed in, convinced a man flanked by such beauties couldn't be poor, and they snarled, threatening to strip him of everything. The women at his side and his money. Karina planted her feet, eyes blazing, and warned the bandits. One step closer and they'd be in deep trouble. Daichi hurled the question like a thrown grenade. "Who's stronger, these 5 or a single king monkey?" The girls bristled, and Alicia was totally stumped, unable to even start comparing them. The attackers felt no fear. They sneered and taunted Karina. A man in the bandit circle sneered, convinced she wouldn't dare take them all on. Another criminal stepped forward and beckoned her to come with him. He had plans for her. He snorted. The gangster's lines sounded ripped straight from a manga. Rage coiled in Daichi when they insulted his friend, and he toyed with the idea of testing the weapon on them. The young man demanded whether those scumbags hadn't been pestering the girls and vowed to wipe them out. Karina snapped that killing them would land them in trouble, though injuring the bandits wouldn't. The stranger slammed into Daichi, rage blazing in his eyes, and snarled, "You really want to take us on?" The escort snapped again. If he killed the bandits, he'd be forced to pay the feudal lord a crippling compensation. A cold dread slammed into Daichi at the thought of becoming a killer and then buying his own peace. He swore he'd never kill, only wound his enemies enough to turn them into warnings for everyone, since adventurers must be ready for anything. Bandits crashed into the trio, blades flashing, and Karina screamed, "I warned you!" The young man asked the escort if he could injure the attackers. She granted permission, and Asakura heard it. Daichi cracked his knuckles, planted himself shoulder to shoulder with Karina and Alicia, and shouted for the girls to get ready. Encircled by enemies, Karina hefted her sword and braced for the coming fight, while a crowd of residents pressed in, buzzing about the spectacle, and Daichi vowed the men wouldn't leave the battle unscathed. The men bristled at the young man's tone and lunged in unison, weapons flashing. Daichi turned to Karina and snapped, "I'll handle the men coming at me." Karina shot him a sharp look from across the table where her opponent sat. He asked Alicia to stand behind him, and the girl and Nick pressed up directly behind the guy as his opponents closed in on him. Daichi made the call to weaponize his uncanny gift, tearing objects from his world to swap for goods in a new one, while strictly excluding any living creature. The power was called Huge Storage Space. His brute strength let him channel magic to spike his physical output and overcharge his gear with no item skill, so he fused both powers into one savage strike aimed at the enemies. Unidentified objects pelted down from the sky, stunning the unsuspecting men. Their legs gave out and they tumbled to the ground. One of the men pinned his gaze on Daichi, who'd just unleashed his attack and was staring down at his own feet. His limb was sheared off. He let out a raw animal scream as shock slammed into him. Another man's leg was torn free, hurling everyone into the same frantic panic, and Daichi watched with icy calm after finishing his attack. With only the last foes left, Karina unleashed a crushing, decisive blow. They fired the question at her. "Did you cut your tendons?" She answered yes, and the men clamped their hands over the wounds, desperation clawing at them as they fought to stem the blood. Karina brandished her blade, and voice like ice hissed that this was punishment for daring to approach her companions. The men trembled and swore they'd never come near again, and after securing consent, she ordered the warning sent to her partners. Voices surged through the crowd as they gaped at the girl's stunning, come-from-nowhere victory. Nick's plaintive cry tore through the chaos as he blinked awake from the noisy fight. Alice's face darkened when she realized the cat's sleep had been disturbed, and she strode straight toward the men. She roared at the bandits, forcing them to apologize to the cat for waking him up. Karina lunged forward, trying to soothe her, but Alicia's gaze blackened as she snapped, "Do you feel sorry for the cat?" And Karina glanced aside, confused, then nodded. Still standing behind her, she thrust her sword at the men and demanded an apology. Terrified, they fell to their knees, begging the cat's pardon like worshippers before a goddess and swearing it would never happen again. Nick meowed contentedly. Alicia softened and urged them to be grateful for the cat's kindness. Daichi and Karina froze in astonishment that the cat's charm could be so scary. The heroes stormed out of the city. Karina demanded why the guy had ripped the enemy's legs off, hinting he'd gone too far, but Daichi shot back that she had already cut their tendons herself. Karina defended herself, snapping that enemies can mend wounds with basic water magic, but only high-level water magic can reattach a severed leg. She warned getting treatment in the royal capital would cost a king's ransom, and Daichi, realizing water magic could heal and restore, knew his cat would have to endure several wounds until they found a reliable healer. The news barely fazed the young man. He whooped that his rivals would be down for a long time and even exulted at having beaten them, while Karina grinned and urged the men to ditch brawling and trade muscle for guile. She warned that Daichi's reckless attacks might have left bandits lying in wait, making the inn impossible to find and forcing them to huddle in tents, and the young man quickly owned up and apologized for his mistake. Karina pushed forward and snapped at the guy. "How did you manage to get their legs off?" She knew Daichi couldn't dodge that question. She'd seen him wield that mysterious ability. Daichi clamped his mouth shut and snarled that only he could wield that unique skill. Karina and Alicia slammed to a stop, gaping at the guy as disbelief and amazement lit up their faces. Seeing their faces, Daichi leaned in and demanded if anyone else wielded those unique skills. Alicia said only a handful did, and the man said his country was the same. Trina cut her off, snapping that only one person here has a unique skill. Daiji couldn't fathom why Alicia had mentioned several of them. He fumbled at the back of his head, words stumbling out, then dropped his eyes and spilled that he'd had to leave his homeland because of his unique skill. He alone in his homeland bore that impossible gift. His own family chose to snuff it out to line their pockets, so he fled and slammed the tail shut mid-sentence. The girls' faces crumpled at the young man's pain, and Daiichi burned with shame for lying to them. He saw his companions lean in hungry for details, but the girls held back, refusing to push the young man. So he glanced over, decided to reveal his unique ability, and asked them to keep it just between themselves. A bullet materialized in his palm. She forged it in an instant from lead and iron. With it, he could hurl searing fire. Karina leaned in, eyes sharp, and asked if it was the same projectile that had ripped the enemy's legs off. Daiichi answered, "Use the power of fire on a bullet and it rockets out at blistering speed with unimaginable force. It devastates everything it hits." He grinned and confessed he wanted to experiment, flaunt his unique skill to the girls and soak up their real combat advice. Tarina fired off, "So you'll keep using the bullet?" And Daichi owned up that he planned to test other kinds of weapons. When the experiments wrapped, he unveiled snacks for the girls, delectable sweets and crunchy, salty bites. And Daichi leaned in, asking Karina which she'd like to try. Her cheeks flamed as she confessed she wanted sweets. Daichi flashed a knowing grin and vowed they'd settle everything over a treat after the experiments. He knew her weakness. Deep in the forest, the heroes slammed to a stop to run experiments. Daichi pushed for a roomier spot, but Karina snapped at him to quit nagging and warned monsters could be lying in wait. Daichi entrusted Nick to Alicia's arms as he plunged into his experiments. Alicia beamed, scooped the cat up and squeezed him tight, and Nick, soaking up her affection, settled happily into the folds of her clothes. Alicia lunged, scooped him into her arms, and barked for him to stop. Daichi beamed, congratulating the cat on its streak of luck. Karina watched from the sidelines and urged them to start training, and when the young man caught her gaze, he grabbed the very item he'd used on the bandits and decided to begin with it. Armed with a Diggle pistol, he shattered the bandits' feet. Those guns spat the most devastating rounds, and when Daichi fired, the blast ripped open a vault in the palm of his hand. He unleashed the skill and fired, gouging a jagged gap in the tree's trunk. Karina and Alicia froze, eyes wide with surprise and bodies taut with caution. Daichi grinned at his handiwork and called for his companion's verdict. The girls stared in awe and leaned in to inspect the tree. And when Karina asked if he'd used lead, Daichi nodded. She pressed if it could be used over and over. He snapped, asking if striking that fast was easy, and got shut down. Karina said ENF rank magicians can dial down their power and fire off spells non-stop. She gasped that she couldn't follow Daiichi's bullet. In his mind, he recalled earth magic tricks like it, but they moved at a crawl compared to this. He declared being a mage meant shouldering a loaded gun at all times. He hammered home how lethal low-ranked magicians are to ordinary people. Karina warned me that adventurers without magic always walk in danger. He tossed out the question. Would a mage wielding raw offensive magic beat a plain adventurer? Karina grinned and declared the magician would have the upper hand. He demanded to know whether attack magic users counted as full-fledged mages, and Alicia snapped that only practitioners registered in a guild at rank F or higher earn official recognition. He flashed a grin and proposed they hash out the mage versus adventurer differences over snacks. The girl whooped as the experiments ended, and Daichi urged her to mirror his every move. He triggered the skill and ripped into the tree with a roaring machine gun barrage. Alicia flinched from the crash. Karina clapped her hands over her ears, and the young man was slammed by the recoil, barely staying upright. It hit him hard. He still had to train. Nick's water bullets flew truer and hit with far more force. Alicia's eyes narrowed as she saw the attacking mages couldn't match Daichi's power and could only strike one target, Karina agreed. And Daichi realized Nick's water magic outclassed even the best attacking mages. Karina scoffed. Explosive magic can barely crack stone, so a tree's even tougher. And Alicia warned that even with multiple earth mages working together, you'd still need one pinpoint, surgical shot. Next to Isaac Among's attack magic, Nick's water bullets looked flimsy. True powerhouse magicians were almost extinct in this world. Relief crashed over Karina when she saw he wouldn't smash the tree, while Daiichi, already itching to test other weapons, held back from crushing her hopes and kept Nick's magic tucked away as his trump card. He tossed out an offer for snacks and the girls snapped yes. He set the table and laid out strawberry shortcake, and as they savored dessert, Daiichi leaned in to bring up mage ranks, but Karina was lost in the sugary haze. He hung back while the girls savored the treat, then pitched a single idea that instantly hooked them. Daiichi unveiled his plan. He was going to open a shop right here in the village. Voices split. Karina said the plan terrified her. She assumed the young man would be back selling strange goods, while Alicia adored the idea and demanded every detail. He pushed the girls to inspect his prototype wares before he paraded them before the head claws. Daiichi fixated on Alicia. She could wield magic items, and he slammed 2 matchboxes onto the table. Karina snatched up the matches, inspecting them as if they were a puzzle, then confessed she'd never seen anything like them and couldn't fathom their purpose. Daiichi snatched up one of the boxes, struck a match that burst into flame, confirmed they were waterproof, and the girls went rigid. No hint of magic reached them. He snapped that matches aren't magic. Any simple person can strike one, and a single spark can burst into a flame that will set anything alight. Alicia shot a blunt question. Could these matches stand in for a magic item? Daiichi nodded, then soaked the sheets so a struck match couldn't ignite a blaze. The dark-haired guy declared he'd sell these items to people who don't use magic. Karina warned the odd goods would likely sell poorly, but he insisted. He just wanted to make people's lives easier. He flashed a triumphant grin, rifling through the matches and ready to hawk the items for a steal. The girls said nothing. Alicia stared, stunned, while Karina calmly ate her cake with her eyes locked on the young man. Noticing Alicia's expression, he sneered that the rich are often hypocritical toward the common people. Karina shot back that she hadn't even thought about it. Daiichi explained he was only looking for a business path, and Karina repeated her words in exasperation. Alicia warned cheap goods would fly off the shelves and demanded whether he had enough supplies or they'd be in trouble. Daiichi assured me his storage was overflowing with stock, and Karina sighed as she took in just how massive the man's stash was. With a grin, he revealed he could craft the products himself, sending Alicia's jaw to the floor. It was easy, so he took the idea straight to Klaus. Confidence blazed in his eyes as he admitted he'd risk anything to convince the chief. The girls smiled softly, resigned they couldn't sway him as he kept devouring the cake. The guy radiated pure joy while Nick stretched out, blissfully laid back in the background. Between bites of his second cheesecake, Daiichi grilled Karina about the 3 elements. She slouched and drawled that she commanded water, fire, and wind, so he fired the same question at Alicia. She averted her eyes and declared she could command every element. The young man's breath hitched, stunned by the confession. Karina barked at him to keep it a secret and fixed him with a hard glare, then snapped at Alicia for rushing in. Alicia hung her head and offered a sheepish apology. Curiosity burned in Daiichi as he wondered what ranks they held. Karina smirked and declared they were both B-ranked. He let that sink in, and it hit him hard. B was a very high level. He gaped. Karina didn't look like a mage after she sliced through the royal apes with a sword, then grinned and said her B rank came solely from objectless wind magic. It hit him like a thunderbolt. During the battle with the royal monkeys, the girl had been wielding magic. Karina snapped that she funneled every ounce of power into the attack. There wasn't time to chain spells or she'd have drained herself dry. Daiichi thrust an ice cream at her as a peace offering, calling it like cream but with a different taste. Karina missed his apology, but one bite and she melted with pleasure. And then he turned to Alicia and asked how she got her rank. Eyes cast down, Alicia owned up that her gift was rare, and her inexperience rooted her to the spot the first time the king monkey loomed. Daiichi's pulse spiked. This girl could wield magic items. The girl nodded and revealed she had a spell. Alicia announced that magic items can amplify objects by imbuing them with properties. An enchanted fire item will erupt with scorching living flame. The item hands its power to the magicless. The spell lives inside it, so she can command it. Daiichi proclaimed a single magic item packed the punch of 4 enchanted ones. Karina shot back, and Alicia cautioned, enchantments are scarce and costly. One spark can blaze out of control. Use those things sparingly. Push them, and they'll spit fire bullets when you only meant to light the furnace. When Daichi pressed her about the gift's nature, Alicia said it was an innate ability. He toyed with delaying the creation of magic items because he was desperate to build an enemy detection station. It would be a nightmare to carry, and he refused to burden the cat, so he kept it hidden as a secret weapon. I hatched a plan to teach Nick wind magic. He pressed Karina. How does she find enemies? And Karina shook her head. She couldn't show it right away. She flopped onto the table, pleading for Karina to demonstrate. Karina scowled, agreed, devoured the last bite of her cheesecake, rose, closed her eyes, and sharpened her focus. Then a colossal compass burst into being above her, its needle sweeping the sky for enemies. Nick jolted awake and locked onto the girl's pulsing magic. Daichi saw the cat flinch and stood his ground. Karina's skin prickled as a strange presence slid out of the trees. Daichi froze and hissed, "Monster!" She shook her head. Its movements were human, leaving him staggered that bandits could be hiding in the forest, and when he demanded how many, Karina couldn't name them. Alicia blurted that 8 people were nearby. Tarina thanked her, but the girl bowed and apologized for interfering. Did she realize her wind magic outclassed Karenina's? The truth slammed into him. Karina was bent on burying Alicia's secret, and Klaus and Jeffrey were hiding it too. I couldn't stall. I had to get back to business. Enemies crowded the trail, probably just ordinary adventurers, so Karina snapped her blade free and ordered everyone to brace for anything and keep their distance. The heroes bolted from the place and plunged deeper into the forest. Daichi wielded a rare gift that could pluck anything she desired from the world, yet she refused to use it. Her restraint made it priceless here. He and Karina could take down 8 enemies to protect Alicia, but the girl insisted they still hide. No one knew what deadly tricks those bandits might have. Nick stripped off his clothes and inhaled sharply. Ditchy watched the cat prick its ears at the trail's scent and instantly assumed bandits had set an ambush. The young man stacked machine guns and rolled out cannons, anxiety knotting his gut, yet he steeled himself to confront those who had destroyed the village. Pressing onward, Karina watched the crowd surge, and Daichi snapped, "How many are there now?" 20 of them. Karina snapped that if they were bandits, their lair had to be close. Mark this spot. Alicia leapt in to help, but Karina shot her down and demanded the team race back to lay everything bare before Klaus and Jeffrey. They stormed back into camp and stood before the chief. He thanked them and snapped at his mate to rush the information straight to the captain. The head slid a steaming cup their way. Dite made clear she wanted to discuss the idea, and Bertram nodded, agreeing to hear him out. News of the store slammed into the head and he recoiled in shock. Daichi clapped his hands over his ears at the outburst and shoved the goods forward. The man demanded an explanation, and the boy struck a match. He grinned with satisfaction and produced a roaring flame. The headman froze, hand to his mouth. Fire needed no magic. The head gingerly plucked a match and asked if it was disposable, noting the flame burned out quickly. Daichi confirmed and said he'd sell them cheap, and the man asked the price. Daichi jabbed at the 2 silver coins, 2,000 yen, and snapped, "They might fetch 1,000 apiece if they're waterproof, but I'm a merchant, not a charity worker." The chief let out a weary sigh, nodded, and asked the price of the flint. Daichi shot back, 1 silver for 60 grand, and the man blinked, stunned they were cheaper than matches. Daichi grinned that they flare up at a touch and stay waterproof, while the head shouted for Karina as he grabbed something from the shelf, thrust it at her, and told her to light it. Karina flicked it alive without effort and left the flame burning on the plate. Daichi realized flint was the real gold mine and moved to sell it. The head urged pricing it above matches and turned to the guy for his take. Daichi slammed his decision into stone. He'd sell them for a single silver coin. Silence slammed down between them. Daichi knew he stood no chance against Klaus, the company head, and a golden crane worth protecting. So he squirmed and prayed the boss would greenlight his plans. The head paused, scratched his mustache, then let the argument die. Daichi also unveiled opulent wares aimed squarely at the rich and royalty for the chapter. The headmaster beamed his agreement, then Captain Jeffrey strode in. Daichi urged we save the details for later and go over the case first. He swung the door open and ushered Jeffrey inside. Behind the heroes, a man with a scarred face loomed. The head demanded the heroes spill everything. Start with what happened in the forest, and end with what's happening now in the village. Bandits descended on the village of Torino, ransacking it and flooding the streets with robbers, while 20 suspicious figures slipped into the woods to take refuge. Chief Bertram grabbed the report, called it riveting, and pointedly asked Captain Jeffrey for his verdict. Captain Jeffrey warned hunters or adventurers might be lurking in the forest, but with the fallout in Torino village and bandits multiplying on the nearby roads, all signs pointed to bandits. Klaus agreed and ordered him to take care of it. Jeffrey nodded to the headmaster's order. Then they carved out a plan and handed out duties to sweep the entire forest, while Daichi's doubt gnawed at him. Could a full outfit and Garn really beat the bandits? Head Bertram backed the group's plan but refused to fracture the team. Jeffrey sprang forward to escort Karina to the search team, and Daichi and Alicia leapt in to help without hesitation. He refused them outright, snapping that they were only guests, and he wouldn't put them in danger if it would stain his reputation. Dorina immediately called out to him. She admitted, relieved to accept her comrade's help. Daichi's victories had proven that help's worth. She clocked the man's strange weapon and his knack for wielding attributeless high magic that ripped everything apart. I remembered his experience with Alicia. Bertram asked if they could even withstand the fight. Karina declared Daichi's blazing power swept the entire camp, highlighted his formidable physique, and insisted he'd dispatch the enemy with ease, and Alicia only nodded, confirming her opinion. Alicia thrust her hand up and vowed to launch magic from afar, but Bertram and Karina cut her off, terrified for her safety and handing the job to the guards, leaving Alicia burning with hurt as she realized her status made everyone uneasy. After settling things with the group, Bertram ordered them to dodge bandits and get home alive, declaring Jeffrey will shadow every movement while Karina must assemble a search party and let the heroes pick its members. After they finished with the head, the heroes burst outside, and Karina declared the search team had only 5 people, and that Nick was an expert in magic without attributes. Daichi noted her sense of duty, and she urged him to keep his abilities hidden from prying eyes for now. Karina vouched for Daichi, then swung to him with a bright smile that sent a flush creeping up his neck. She stared, wondering how he'd hide that impossible skill, while Daichi, sure he was already concealed, told her he'd think about it, picturing a bow in his mind before, in a flash, a katana locked in his hands. Karina screamed at the boy and girl, "Dennis, Frida!" and told them there was a job for them. Dennis and Frida slid to face the girl who asked what kind of work awaited them, then swept their gaze across her companions. Karina's voice snapped. She'd picked up the presence of a suspicious group of 20 in the forest and urged them to join her and her team as they pushed in to investigate. Dennis rubbed his chin, eyes narrowing as he counted the outlaws and declared it wouldn't pay off. Free laughed, used to her partner's constant bad luck on the job. Daichi warned flatly that these guys were seasoned professionals. Karina offered to spill the details on the way, ask her who the girls invited. Deeper into the forest, Karina and Daichi barreled to the front. Alicia anchored the center, and Dennis and Frida rear-guarded the group. Dennis yanked Daichi to a halt, grinning as he realized that despite the man's simple merchant guise, he fought like a seasoned warrior. Daichi confessed he was puzzled by the remark and pointed out the royal monkeys' clash was their second straight fight. Dennis slapped him on the back with a grin and formally declared him the winner, praising his battle prowess. Daichi protested, asking not to be addressed so formally. Dennis burst into laughter, joked he'd start calling him Lord, and slung an arm around his shoulders. The man leaned in, voice razor-sharp. "Daichi, you're really heading to Karam, opening a store there?" He declared Karim his target, but swore he needed somewhere to sleep first. Dennis pushed for the store. The city was packed and a strategic prize, yet Dennis himself chose to delay the trip, leaving Daichi stunned. The man admitted, voice thick with longing, that once Daichi reached the village of Takora, he hoped he'd trade and haul back rare goods from abroad, and Daichi understood, replying he'd open a small kiosk after the search operation wrapped up. He said he was gauging demand first. When Dennis asked what he was selling, he answered, "Matches." Dennis's eyes widened. The man snapped it wasn't about lighters and flashed a waterproof match. Dennis and Frida gaped. Daichi had pulled that off without a scrap of magic. And Karina spun to the group, announcing they were closing on a spot where she'd just sensed 8 people. She couldn't sense anyone, so she snapped at the crew to stay sharp, Dennis, seeing the girl's worry, flung himself onto the deck, shot a leg into the air, and yelled he was ready to fight. Karina and the others weren't impressed, and he wound up stuck in a humiliating, awkward pose. Nick peeled off Daichi's clothes. The trail's scent slammed into him. Daichi's instincts snapped to attention. Enemies might be lurking nearby. Nick picked up wind magic, a red flag that should have put them on full alert. Daichi braced to warn the team, but Alicia's instincts flared and she announced 3 people 5 kilometers ahead. The heroes barreled toward their goal. Daichi snatched binoculars from his inventory and slammed them to his eyes to scour the horizon, while Dennis stared, stunned by the odd device until Daichi grinned and said, "It lets you see what's happening at a distance." He urged the man to try the binoculars. Dennis peered through the unfamiliar lenses and froze, shock tearing through him while Frida watched with a wary, calculating gaze. Daichi whipped to Karina, shouting he'd seen a distant glow through the binoculars and thrust them into Dennis's hands. But it was Nick's instincts that had actually found it. Karina's glare sliced the air as she snapped that an unknown group was hiding less than 2 kilometers away. She had no details, so she barked for everyone to widen the search. Still clutching the binoculars, Dennis lauded the girl for her sharp eyes and the vital intel she'd fed them. The team pinned their hopes on Alicia's magic as Karina snapped everyone to battle stations. Dennis and Frida gripped their weapons and hoisted the shield. Karina urged Aichi to take it too. At the girl's words, a massive shield sprang up before the young man, enveloping him completely. Karina stared, baffled by its size, while Alicia smiled, praising its raw strength and clear effectiveness. Hidden in the brambles, the team huddled and whispered a daring plan, while Alicia jabbed a twig into the dirt and drew the cave's location, roughly 2 kilometers away. She warned that an unknown group was holed up inside it. Humans and animal-like people, over 50 of them and maybe even past 60. The team tensed at the news. Alicia admitted this was all she could feel. The opponents were holed up in the cave, cutting off any deeper reach. Dennis snapped that it screamed, "Underground organization." And though she was free to stop the man from jumping to conclusions, she admitted she shared his suspicions. Karina decided they had enough information and pushed forward. Before that, Dicey confessed they'd been acting with excessive caution. Dennis and Frida locked eyes and exploded into laughter at the guy's taunts, snapping that in the cave lurked animal-like people with razor-sharp noses. They halted, then insisted they must rush back to the city with full details, boasting they'd found the hideout and pinned down the enemy's approximate numbers. Dennis and Frida erupted into proud laughter, already hunting for a special reward for the find. Daichi lurched into an awkward stretch, then forced out, "I get it." Dennis clapped a firm hand on his shoulder and declared, "Honesty is the linchpin of security." The young man forced an awkward smile at the man's words as the lie about where he came from stabbed back into his mind. Karina, spotting Daichi's sudden shift, ordered them to go back, then reached out, touched the guy, and blew him a kiss. Dennis tapped the guy lightly and grinned, already feeling his charisma. On their way back to the city, Daichi planted 2 leads at the base of a couple of random trees. They returned to the city, only to find a desolate wasteland where tents and carts had once jammed the streets. Karina shouted they were moving to the village as carts heaving trunks and boxes thundered through the area, sweeping the field bare. The girl snapped that the villagers were only watching. Daichi's jaw tightened. He feared the bandits might come back. Karina assured me their goal wasn't to fight. Dennis said the guards could handle it, but warned the team's strength was far from decent. With the night order already racing an envoy ahead to deliver the warning, the team was pinned in the village, baiting the enemy and buying time until the knights arrived. Enemies swarmed in far beyond what they'd expected. Frida offered to plead with the villagers for help, doubt gnawing at her. Would anyone believe them? And Karina snapped they had to take everything straight to the head first. They should have holed up inside the village for the night, but they bedded down in the entrance square, a place to spot a surprise attack and rouse the residents for backup the moment trouble hit. The village chief pledged to cooperate and aid the team. Frida remembered the village's civil defense force and admitted it'd be perfect if they joined, and Dennis barked that if an attack came, they'd have no choice. Karina snapped at Dennis and Frida to rest until evening and return to their duties, then led Daichi and Alicia down the main street to show them around, and they noticed the girl never addressed the young man by his last name. They leaned in with smug grins as she fumbled for an excuse, insisting he simply doesn't like formalities, while her cheeks flamed bright red. Dennis remembered that during the assignment the girl never once spoke his name. Frida shrugged it off, convinced Karina was just overexcited, and Dennis kept taunting her until she snapped. She drew her sword and demanded he stop, and the man asked Daiichi for her opinion. The dark-haired man plastered a calm nod to his companion's guesses about her concern, but inside he felt them pointing to something darker. The boy clenched his jaw, swore he wouldn't let that happen, and shoved those thoughts away. Frida yanked the girl into a hug, planting a quick kiss on her cheek and promising they'd talk later. Karina kept her at arm's length and rejected the offer. Dennis swore Karina was finally ready to talk, only fanning the girl's fury, and they turned to Daichi again, demanding his take on Karina. A sheepish smile tugged at his lips as he blurted that she was ridiculously cute. Inside, his brain slammed the brakes, desperate to stop him. Those words plunged Karina into even deeper confusion, while Frida and Dennis exploded into cheers. He seized her hand and sprinted toward the main street, leaving the duties to his partners. Frida and Dennis called out good luck to the young couple, and Karina told them they'd be opening a store. Bursting onto Main Street, the heroes had about 2 hours to burn. Daichi charged into the crowd first, testing how the locals would react to his wares. Karina averted her eyes and saw the street swarming. There was no escaping the uproar. Alicia locked onto her reaction and demanded what happened to the guy, but Karina clamped her mouth shut and refused to say a word. She snapped that they couldn't delay. Get the store ready for the opening while there's still time. He told the girls to wait for him while he spoke with the saleswoman. Daichi beckoned her over to see what he had, snagging her attention, then laid out several boxes of flint on the table. She admitted she was already jealous at the sight of so much product. She admitted that getting older makes you ache with envy the moment you see so many products, and the young girl beside her nodded in agreement. A guy demanded how they lit the fire, and the woman, baffled, said she'd struck it with flint. The girl had actually sparked the flame herself, propped up by a tiny flicker of magic. Daichi flashed a grin and offered to show them a special gadget that could easily ignite a fire. No magic required. He ripped a match from the box and asked the woman to give him her hand to show him how it would work. A sudden spark exploded to life. He struck a single match and coaxed a tiny blaze to life. She gasped, and every neighbor's head snapped toward them. Karina and Alicia beamed with pride at his daring, their business finally ready to take off. After a triumphant trial, Daichi ignited a frenzy for their strange wares, then strained to be heard over the roar, shouting that waterproof matches were still available and begging the crowd to line up. People who'd already bought it ripped it out and tried it on the spot, shock blazing across their faces as fires flared without a drop of magic, and Daichi planted a deep cauldron packed with wood onto the ground. Clutching a box of flint, he boomed that the kindler would fling fire across the wood and tossed in that it was disposable. Daichi saw the customers wanted action, not explanations, so he didn't hesitate and struck a spark that leapt into flame. The crowd froze, jaws slack and eyes locked as flames hungrily ate through the wood. He kept hyping his wares, boasting that even someone with no magic could spark a flame. And with a kindler, the tiniest ember would swell into a hungry blaze that could ignite any firewood. He bellowed that each box contained 20 matches and sold for 2 silver coins, while the kindler's box offered 60 matches for only 1 silver coin. Daichi watched the crowd flip the instant the prices were announced. A girl pushed through the crowd and scooped up a box of every item. Daichi thanked her and asked for a moment to show her something special. She assumed he meant his other products. Daichi declared he'd hand a bonus to every last customer, certain they'd love it. He slammed a metal grate onto a pot roaring with flames, and the crowd leaned in as the cook, with steady hands, threaded chunks of meat onto wooden skewers and seared them right before their eyes. They demanded to know what he'd fried. Daichi replied it was bite-sized chicken threaded onto skewers and drizzled with sauce. Even though the city cooked chicken all the time, they'd never seen it look this mouth-watering. The scent sliced through the crowd and had everyone drooling, and Daichi, knowing the poor and jobless barely ate, had somehow ignited their hunger. Grabbing a sizzling shish kebab, he thrust it at the girl who'd just bought 2 of his products and dared her to take a bite. She shot Daichi a grateful smile, took the skewer, carefully pulled a steaming piece of chicken off the stick, And as the crowd held its breath, she poised to sink her teeth into the juicy roast, eager to taste every last savory bite. She erupted, proclaiming the kebab ridiculously delicious, her eyes blazing with joy as they stayed locked on the dish. Daichi exhaled like he'd cleared a mountain. She loved the meat. The customer devoured every piece without dropping the skewer, asked for the recipe, and reached for her wallet. The girl's reaction ignited a buzz. Residents swarmed the guy, eager to know if they too had to buy supplies to taste the new dish, and Daichi grinned, saying he had plenty of kebabs, so nobody needed to buy a thing. Temptation hit, and the crowd exploded into shouts, yelling how many boxes they all wanted to grab. Once he hushed the excited crowd, he pressed a couple grand into an elderly woman and a girl's hands, thanked the ladies for letting him open a shop in the neighborhood, apologized for the trouble, and the old woman just waved him off, saying she'd be closing the shop anyway. Daichi pressed a box of sizzling kebab into their hands as a thank you. The women bit in, eyes lighting up, then thanked him. Demand hit like a tidal wave, sending the young man's head spinning. The woman and the girl said goodbye, and he sprinted forward, shouting that the store was closing and urging everyone to hurry their purchases. As Daichi kept working, a pack of shifty men with predatory grins closed in. They'd seen his business boom and meant to demand their cut. The moment the men spotted him, he snatched the meat and stuffed it into the box. They demanded a treat for his generosity. But Daichi calmly shot back that the meat was already finished for today. The men erupted in anger at his answer, snapping that Daichi had only just fried the meat. The young man bowed, declared the shop closed, and asked them to come back tomorrow to buy the goods and taste the dish, leaving the men once again stunned by his audacity. They exploited the buyer's rights and surged at the man to teach him a brutal lesson in doing business. But a swordsman stepped in and blocked their path with his blade still sheathed. Karina thrust herself in front of Daichi to shield him, fixing the man with a steely glare as one barked a threat to stay out, and the eye-patched man sneered that she was only a B-rank mage. B and C-ranked chains flashed on her pinky. The men staggered back at the threat, but they surged forward, dead set on taking Daichi down. Karina warned them she would protect the guy, and with a single icy glance dared anyone to stir up trouble. One of them smirked, sure she couldn't handle four. She slung her sword over her shoulder and, voice ice-cold, warned him not to underestimate her. The men flinched at the deadly seriousness of her words. The others backed away, insisting there were no goods or meat left for today. But the blonde froze, staring back into bewilderment and lunging to stop his retreating comrades. Then a voice cracked from behind him. A scarred man perched on a building's windowsill above the street and demanded, "What are those men up against?" One of them instantly recognized the guest and shouted his first name. Alan! Alan leaned in and asked if a fight was coming, volunteering to back his friends. The blonde man took the offer and spat a venomous promise of retribution at Karina, but she missed the hint. So Daichi refused to linger and pulled her away. The blonde man's partners swept back in and raked the young man with jeers, threatening to rough him up for daring to mock them. Daichi's voice stayed soft and innocent as he tried to calm them. Then he chuckled again and declared he thought they were idiots. It sparked a savage backlash. The men stopped backing off and surged forward, fists flying straight at the young man. Alan slammed into the lineup, dropped into battle stance, and braced for the coming clash as grins ripped across their faces. The heroes didn't even flinch at the threat. From the sidelines, Alicia and Nick shouted good luck to Karina and Daichi, while Alan's grin cracked wide with pride as he pressed the men to lay out the problem. The blonde man shot a cold look and snarled that Karina and Daichi had been tormenting them all this time, and he'd teach those kids a brutal lesson about how their world works. Alan snapped for him to get to the point, suggesting the blonde was really just scared of the youngsters. The crowd's laughter ignited the blonde's fury. He jabbed a finger at the indifferent girl and snarled that she was a B-rank mage, not someone who could be laughing. The laughter stopped cold as the men snapped to seriousness and locked their stares on the girl, while Alan grinned and warned them they'd better be careful. He realized in an instant she was the lone mage. The men exchanged grim nods, drew their swords, and readied themselves to attack the young men, intent on teaching them a lesson. Karina barked a warning to Daichi. The two up front and the one in back might be magicians. If they're only body-enhanced, we can handle them. but if they wield real magic, even bullets will be useless. She asked him to take one, and Daichi beamed. Her first ever plea for help sparked a fire in him. He charged his skill and accepted his partner's request. The young man cracked his knuckles, ready to take on two foes, but Karina urged him to handle the one right in front, and Alan barked for everyone to focus on the fight. Two men lunged at the heroes with flashing swords. Alan readied a crackling spell to strike back, and Daichi squared up to launch a ruthless counterattack. With one thunderous strike, he took out three blood-spattered foes at once, already gushing blood and unable to rise. And moments later, those same enemies were forced to their knees before Karina and Daichi. She dared them to apologize, a forced smirk glued to her lips. The blonde played clueless, asked his partners, and they only answered her cue with curt headshakes. Daichi slid in beside him to pin down the details. The blonde man forced an awkward smile and promised he'd answer any question. A man asked if they'd received a request to exterminate goblins, and the blonde confirmed it. The man revealed he was a registered city adventurer, and his squad had taken the official request. He snapped that Alan's squad hadn't been assigned it, and Daichi demanded the exact number of goblins they'd captured. The blonde's crew couldn't snag a single goblin, and the other man's team came up empty too. Daichi clamped his mouth shut and weighed his next move. He jabbed a finger at the bald adventurer, tendons cut, and declared his squad had captured 11 goblins. Daichi whipped around to the bald man and demanded confirmation. The man nodded, and Daichi leaned in, pressing him to reveal everything about his partners. I yanked him to a halt and demanded the others spill everything about the bald man's squad, while Karina jabbed a finger at the eye patch man and snapped for him to talk. He shot back that the man ran a 4-person team, jabbing first at a blonde man with medium-length hair and saying he wielded water and healing magic. He jabbed at the front-liners and declared they could wield magic too. The squad's last member, Alan, specialized in attack magic, and Daichi, noting the team's balance, wasn't surprised they'd captured 11 goblins. Yet doubt still churned in him. He spun to the other adventurers who'd also taken the goblin extermination request in Torino village and demanded answers. The eye patch man snapped that they and the other mage squad had accepted the job, yet not a single goblin had stirred in the village for 10 days. A band of mages swept into the village later, and 3 days after that, the goblins slithered in. Daichi marveled at the party's luck in dodging the monster attack. The adventurer agreed, and when he looked back, Daichi's gaze snapped to the mage. He leaned in, eyes blazing, desperate to hear every detail of their mission to capture the goblins. He said he'd reached the village and barreled straight into the forest to hunt down a lair. The mage, hearing from the other squads that the goblins hadn't shown for 10 days, guessed the monsters had shifted, so they plunged into the wood's darkest depths. And Daichi snapped, "Seen any tracks?" The answer hit like a blow. No. Inside, Daichi and Karina locked eyes, the silence roaring between them. He pivoted to the girl and demanded what to do with the adventurers now, offered to hand them over to the local government, then gave the man room to retreat, and the adventurers immediately welcomed it. Karina laid a steady hand on his shoulder and volunteered to relay the information to Klaus and Jeffrey. Daichi snapped his gaze to the wizard as the goblin hunt tale replayed in his head, suspicion flaring. The man's story felt false and it gnawed at him. He watched the mage clamp his mouth shut, and suspicion flared inside him. After dumping every scrap of intel on Klaus, the man confirmed Torino village had been struck by bandits, and learned 2 squads were already there on a goblin capture mission. He spun back to the girl and demanded, "Did you feel anything when you questioned those men?" Karina snarled that a quartet of mages radiated a pitch-black aura, and warned not to trust even other squads. Klaus claimed the squads were colluding, but the girl couldn't confirm his words and demanded everyone stay on guard. He planted himself at the round table and demanded whether Daichi had dug up every scrap of intel, then branded his kiosk affront. Karina's expression tightened as she realized it might tie back to the situation in Torino. Klaus had planned to dispatch a team to the local bar today to pull the necessary information, but he conceded. Asakura had already leapfrogged him and seized the lead. Karina bit her lip after the man's words and apologized to him. He snatched an empty mug, poured the drink with steady hands, then hissed that Daichi contacting the squads under the guise of a search was suspicious, and asked the girl if the other adventurers had noticed. Karina's mind replayed her partner's razor-sharp questioning, enough to convince adventurers their party was guarding the village and roads from bandits and keeping trouble at bay. Then Klaus let out a heavy sigh and asked her what she thought of Daichi. The girl shot back that Mr. Asakura's conscientiousness knows no bounds, insisting he's razor-sharp and brilliantly intelligent, and she never doubted his top-tier education. She remembered Daichi crunching numbers in his head at lightning speed, no paper, no pen, and Klaus pointed out that not even a seasoned merchant could tally those complex sums and sign contracts that fast, so Karina nodded in agreement. She made sure to bring up their forest training. Mr. Asakura snapped his pen to life, worked out her hit distance, and scrawled a formula-like equation she couldn't decipher. The head leaned in, asked if she remembered the formula blueprint, and she shook her head from side to side. She confessed she couldn't parse the formulas, let alone memorize them, while Daichi attacked the problem with triangulation, his scrawled calculations looking like rough estimates to a baffled Karina, and he looked every inch a university mathematician. Asakura finished crunching the numbers, fished a strange gadget from his coat, and pinned the distance, and Klaus fired back that the man might be from his homeland's royal family or born to aristocracy. Karina bristled at his words, warning Daichi might be a wealthy, noble heir or merely a spoiled son. When Klaus pressed her to clarify, she snapped that the young man treated everything like a game. She noticed Mr. Asakura barreled into situations without checking if he could handle them, while everyone else scrambled to fix his messes, and he flaunted his talent on a stage that looked built just for him. Report finished, Karina's eyes flashed as she ordered them to start tracking Daichi, a secret royal, an aristocrat, and possible heir. Klaus slammed his fist and demanded the reason. The girl shot back that every odd item Asakura brings screams of high-class magic without attributes, and his storage is far too vast for any ordinary magician or adventurer. The girl declared his razor-sharp education and boundless knowledge let him slip out of any trap by turning the environment and people into instruments. Daichi could hold an entire country in his iron grip. The thought gnawed at her, but she pushed on. If he's the ruler of another magically advanced power, his sway over their country would be titanic. Klaus fired the question straight at her. Did she want to defeat Lord Asakura as the daughter of Count Crush, who belongs to the royal faction? Karina hadn't seen that conclusion coming. She snapped for an explanation and slammed her palms down on the table. He leaned back and apologized with a smile. I was only joking. But she, not amused, snapped that Gendorf's plight wasn't a laughing matter. He averted his gaze and pressed on, because even ignoring his rank, Asakura's goods alone would drive the factions into a savage fight to claim him. Karina echoed the leader's warning that deity could be whisked out of the country, and Klaus urged the girl to shield the young man to stop it. Rejoining their team, they sliced through the village's bustling street while the dark-haired man scowled, questioning why they'd fallen back into the original lineup. Frida spun to him with a malicious grin and asked what he was unhappy about. The young man took a tiny step back and stammered. He was only curious, and Frida closed in, proclaiming their team already a family while Daichi gave an awkward, forced nod. She proposed swapping Dennis for younger companions. The man erupted in fury. Frida then asked the young man if he'd rather see beauties instead of the old uncle, and red-faced, he agreed to leave Dennis. Nick reacted too. Frida shot a stiff, honorific-laced congratulations at her friend, because the man and his cat had approved of Dennis's presence, and Dennis squirmed under the formality, while Karina barked at everyone to stick to the strategy so they wouldn't run into bandits again. The girl locked eyes with Daichi and declared Frida and Dennis were both B-rank mages, lethal in melee and deadly at range. And Daichi felt a spark of curiosity. Did every mage at that rank wield the same power? Karina crackled with wind magic, and if Frida and Dennis wielded fire, they'd outgun her in offense. Daichi admitted their skills were sharp. Dennis flushed at the praise, and Frida shrugged that she didn't feel special. Bertram's guards were all mages above D rank. The youth blinked in confusion. He'd pictured Bertram's guards as mighty, but Dennis told him they're known as a simple security company, and Karina smirked, explaining Dennis is a pro at mass-type attack magic that can force enemies to retreat from the battlefield. Daichi's stomach dropped as realization slammed into him. The next fights could be shockingly easy. Frida and Dennis nodded, confirming Karina's words. The heroes reached the bar and froze at its doors. Before they stepped inside, Nick let out a low, disapproving growl. He felt threatened. Daiichi's jaw dropped at the cat's sudden mood shift and how it reacted to this place. Alicia stepped forward and tried to pet him. The guy figured Nick had sniffed out the bandits in the bar using perfume magic. Karina asked cautiously what had happened. Relief surged through her. If those were the same adventurers they'd met before, they'd remember their victory over them. Dennis flung the tavern door wide and strode inside. The bar thundered with noisy customers drinking. Daichi scanned the room with hungry interest. Dennis licked his lips the moment he stepped in, and Karina glanced back to spot a suspicious group. She spotted a band of adventurers. Among them, Alan was bellowing at the top of his lungs. Alicia exploded into praise for Nick. He'd sensed the danger at the last possible second. Daichi watched as Alan stood whole again, his wound sealed. Karina snapped that they had a water mage who could heal them in minutes. They'd planned to pose as visitors, but after facing their opponents, Karina balked, calling the ruse inappropriate, while Dennis slumped to the floor in frustration, finally craving a drink. Frida jabbed her partner's shoulder and told him to buy a drink and wait outside for the young couple. Inside the bar, Daichi snatched a vase from one of the men, handed it to Karina, who slid it to a hooded stranger whose face stayed hidden. As the adventurers spilled out of the village, it hit Karina. They were leaving. Daichi was sure they were headed for the forest, but she shook her head. There was no reason they'd be out there looking for connections. Their contact was probably hiding deep in the forest, and the adventurers were charging toward him with a report. Daichi scratched his nose, smirked, and vowed they'd tell them exactly how strong Bertram's guards were. Karina scoffed at the idea the adventurers would say that, but she was certain they'd praise the team's combat skills. As she watched the two men, Alicia sensed another presence moving through the forest. They'd dispatched the team, desperate to at least eavesdrop on the adventurers' conversation. The heroes crouched deep in the bushes, and Alicia's gut screamed that everything was about to go wrong. Alicia declared that, from their conversation, the adventurers had run into the patrol. Dennis pointed out it made sense. They were heading out to hunt monsters. Frida scoffed that the watch rarely even patrols the outskirts. Daichi leaned in and fired the question at Dennis about goblin hunters' strength. Dennis cracked a grin. Goblins only become lethal in huge swarms, and with no leader it's routine, so the guild throws low-ranked adventurers in to clear the area. Daichi's gut screamed this foe outclassed goblins. If their ranks swelled, they'd call reinforcements, and as long as the beasts stayed few, the village would lie undefended. It mirrored Torino. Goblins were hurled at the village in small raiding parties. The villagers begged the guild for help, and bandits watched from the shadows, counting the defenders' strength before deciding to attack or retreat. Alicia, having overheard the conversation, radioed that the adventurers wouldn't charge head-on. They'd slip past Bertram's company and strike the village from the far side. Daichi's jaw dropped at the audacity. Karina snapped, "Is this an ambush?" Alicia shook her head. No, they're only being careful. She begged Alicia to let them eavesdrop. She tightened her focus, and in seconds Daichi and the party could make out every word the adventurers spoke. Two men whispered that Bertram's caravan had stalled and the watch was acting strangely. Daichi's jaw dropped. Karina shot back that Alicia had bent the wind to carry voices, and one of the men demanded why Bertram's company was even in the village. Alan warned the company might be sniffing around the Torino incident, and the man snapped, "Is that the same village we attacked earlier?" One of the men hissed that they'd slaughtered every soul in that village, and the bandits, seeing Bertram's company as their biggest obstacle, began plotting a ruthless plan. Their presence flipped the odds. With the boss at their side, the men vowed they'd score a much bigger jackpot this time. They all nodded in friendly agreement, but Alan's cautious reminder cut through the calm. Those guards were monstrously powerful, and toppling them would be anything but easy. No one flinched. They were sure only two guards posed a real threat, and a B-rank mage sparked no serious concern. His squad bristles with 5-rank mages. Silence slammed down, and the heroes froze, breath snatched. Frida and Dennis locked eyes, worry sharp between them. The battle ahead loomed brutal and merciless. Karina snatched the report on the intel and headed off to hand it in, leaving Daichi and Alicia to guard the camp. Alicia wrestled the cat into a game, and the boy sat rooted until someone called out to him. Grinning and clinging to Nick, Alicia's eyes flashed with hungry curiosity. Where had this guy come from, dragging breakthrough tech and legendary discoveries in his wake? Daichi, cheeks burning, fumbled out a cautious answer. He clammed up, fumbling over tech talk so his past came out like a tangled mess. Daichi began scheming to switch the subject and pull the girl's attention away. He locked eyes with his cat and declared, "Cats are ruling my country right now." Alicia was blindsided by the answer and leaned in, eyes burning, desperate for every detail of the cat situation as their popularity exploded. Daichi grinned, saying that in his country almost every home has a cat, that there are whole institutions where people go just to spend time with them, and that one cat photo on the news can make any feline an overnight superstar. Alicia hung on every word, eyes shining with admiration. He continued, saying countless things are crafted for cats. Giant cat mansions, mountains of accessories, objects plastered with their faces, and even items molded into the cat's very forms. Alicia's eyes lit up with curiosity as she asked what he meant by animal-shaped. Daichi grinned and whipped out a pair of slippers, a mug, and a cat-faced watch to prove it. Charm hit her like a siren. The girl was hooked, drinking in every tiny detail, from the plate to a portable charger whose purpose she couldn't even name. She hit her knees, breathless as she realized cats were born to be adorable. Daichi's homeland had ambushed her with the one thing she'd never expected. Tears welled in her eyes. She'd always dreamed of crafting magic tools, yet none of the ideas the guy showed had come from her. Daichi laid a steady hand on her shoulder, trying to calm her. He snarled that if she mimicked this, fresh ideas would die on the spot, and he pegged her as a creator equal to the artists from his homeland, while Daichi urged her not to lose heart and to keep fighting. He urged her to lock onto the image of cute cats to ignite fresh creative sparks, and Alicia's face lit up as she seized his suggestion with delighted glee. She pressed him to teach her everything he knew. Daichi agreed, but in his gut he admitted it had spiraled out of control. The demonstration hit its peak. He lifted a soft paw, revealed a squishable gadget you could crumple to melt stress away, then yanked out an animal carrier. Nick slipped inside without a second thought. When he emerged in a suit, Alicia's emotions exploded into a raging storm. The cat tilted forward a fraction. Alicia's gaze snagged on a tiny wing stitched to his outfit as a towering robot cat loomed nearby, doling out drinks. Her delight blazing, Alicia refused to stop and pleaded with Daichi to unleash even more jaw-dropping feline feats. She snapped on a cat ear headband, tugged on paw gloves, and in the blink of an eye, the costume swept her up faster than she ever expected. Daichi's breath hitched at her image. He flashed a grin and dared her to end every sentence with meow. Alicia's cheeks burned bright red with embarrassment. She dove in, popping up into goofy, over-the-top poses as the guy gushed praise, while Nick quietly scrubbed his face like he hadn't noticed a thing. Alicia slipped into her cat pajamas, and Daichi couldn't cope. Tears sprang to his eyes as he gushed admiration, just as Karina returned to the camp, puzzled. As many as 5 magicians stood in a row, radiating confidence, while the dark-haired man's brow furrowed in puzzlement. Several men clustered beside them, and one stepped forward, claiming he'd fought them personally and offering to tell you everything. He barked, "They should all wait until they leave here." The boy froze, eyes wide. He didn't admit his fear, but it screamed from him. The man cocked a questioning brow and asked again, "That girl is pure danger. He at least knows how they were laid. Nobody suspects the kid. The man only knows he planted a piece of lead right on the leg, and he suspects earth magic." He clapped a hand to the back of his head, cheeks burning. If that had been a magic projectile, his enchanted armor would have repelled it. He hadn't cast an attack spell. Akeem and Elmer had their legs torn off in the clash as the man threw his arms wide, grinning that it was his handiwork and snarling they had only themselves to blame for dropping their guard. Only 6 bandits were rounded up in the village. The girl cupped her chin, eyes narrowing as she thought. He scoffed, snapping that he'd only been wasting his time. "We have to tell the guys in the village everything. The final decision lands tomorrow afternoon." "You can try praying they'll cancel the raid," the guy sneered. At once, the girl shouted for everyone to fall in behind her down the road. They had to go. Alan and his team scoffed at the mission and paid for it when a guard girl and a strange man steamrolled them. The man stayed silent at first, but is he absolutely sure there's a B-rank mage among them? Only one mage was a woman. He swore she wore the Guild of Magicians identification badge. He crossed his arms, eyes cold. What about that guy? Could he actually outmatch a B-rank mage? He said Elaine had zeroed in on that schoolboy, and the kid hid a danger far deadlier than he looked. The man spun to the boss and asked what they should do now, but the boss went silent, brow furrowed and eyes locked in thought. The hooded man warned they'd have to face Bertram's company, and a storm of problems would break loose. Worry knotted the crowd, but their numbers had swelled, so this should go smoothly, right? The man asked, hope clinging to his voice. The opponent's a B-rank magician. B-rank? The man snapped. Don't forget them. He almost wrote them off as nothing, but that wasn't what he meant. So what now? This has to end. Even if the vigilantes surge into action, Bertram's company won't lift a finger to help. The man locked eyes with the other person and sneered. Let me guess, he's already set his trap. The boy beamed as he replied. It's true. The head of Virtuum's company is aboard the caravan. Whispers call him a man with an unyielding sense of justice, so why not bait the vigilantes and draw them straight into a trap? He said the vigilantes stood sentinel at the north gate, and Bertram's caravan had ground to a halt at the south gate. And every word rang true. The man confirmed it. Alan had said so. If anyone dared attack the vigilantes at the north gate, Bertram's company will surge to their aid at once. And the scarred boy grinned broadly. That's right. What will they do? Loot everything you can lug out until Bertram's reinforcements arrive, or butcher the vigilantes and rob them blind. The haul won't be big, and Bertram's company can still descend. This village teems with young girls. Nothing like the last one. The group still craves time to laugh and play with them. Going back to do it again tempts the heart, but the man scowled sternly and dismissed it as pointless. He realized that even if they smashed the vigilantes, the other tasks would still eat up time, and setting an ambush would all but guarantee reinforcements showing up before they finished. Those people stood no chance against Bertram's company. They could ambush Bertram's company and finish it. If they succeeded, they'd seize the village's money and the women, and haul off the caravan's cargo, wagons stuffed to the brim. Nobody's even thinking of attacking Bertram's company, and whispers that they hold the ranked power Mangas haven't spread, but that Mangas can unleash devastating chaos. They demanded Pete's opinion. Mr. Allen cowered, too terrified to take it into account. Just like Joseph said, rumor has it every warrior in Bertram's company is a lethal fighter, so the boy opts to steer clear of a head-on clash. That's what he thinks. One fatal loophole gapes wide. Nobody forbade a surprise attack, so how can Pete possibly disprove that? At the north gate, the vigilantes, backed by their forces, will steamroll the fight. Pete beamed. His face snapped serious. If they rush to Ram, they'll hunker down to protect only themselves, letting everyone else turn away and raid the village, and anyone who dares defend it will be picked off one by one. He knows the enemy will move to its own advantage. The vigilantes aren't fools. They'll corral the villagers into a secure spot, most likely the village center where they can keep watch over them all through the night. I get it. If they wipe out the vigilantes, Bertram's men holed up in the village will instantly surge in to take their place. These people split their forces, flinging troops in every direction and leaving everyone stunned. The vigilantes will dig in and hold the line, buying the crucial time until Bertram's company arrives from the village center. So what's stopping them from brushing off the vigilantes and racing straight to the village? They could scour empty houses for supplies until backup arrives, then melt away. He lunges to warn them about the risks, but Pete keeps shouting that Bertram's company will arrive before they can leave, and any crazed mugger won't get away in time. They're not idiots. If Bertram's forces can call in reinforcements, they'll wipe out every trace, evacuate the villagers, and they'll return to empty homes with no money or supplies. Pointless. Why not strike Bertram's companies instead? Charge Bertram's company first, and you'd crash into them head-on, a gamble they wouldn't risk, because the company utterly outmatched any ordinary vigilante. You can't approach the ram, yet it can pounce on you in an instant, right? Pete grinned and said they thought the same, implying the company would hold a chunk of its forces in the south while slipping others into the village center to fight as partisans. The plan is brutally simple. Seize the northern gate, Strike the vigilantes from both flanks, the main gang and ascent group. Obliterate the vigilantes. Unleash instant terror that shatters the villagers' faith, leaving only Bertram's company to be dealt with. Before the knights arrive, they'll ambush Bertram's company and butcher them. If that happens, the villagers might flee, but wouldn't they more likely dive into the company's wagons and hide? Everything's crystal clear. Spring an ambush. This is a full-on strike against the vigilantes. The plan's a fake. Pete's going to plant it under their noses on purpose, so the man nailed it. This is where their real plan kicks off. Pete's grin split his face as he pressed a finger to his lips. They're hooked. Let him continue. Meanwhile, the village chief slammed his doors, packed his house with worried elders, and ordered a meeting to unmask bandits hiding among adventurers and gauge the strength of the bandits' main group. 2 questions slammed into focus: what to do with the intel stolen from spying on the bandits, and how to lock the village down until the knights arrived. Since the bandits' own information had been leaked near Takura village, it wouldn't surprise anyone if they turned that leak against them. Same tactics. Whether they agreed to the plan or not, they hammered out a rough blueprint of countermeasures at the general meeting. At the north gate, the vigilantes and goblin-hunting adventurers hold the line, while Bertram's company stakes out the south gate, watching every move. Bertram anchors his main force in the village's heart, forging them into partisan fighters who will instantly smash any attack on the gates and choke off every attempt to slip through the walls. They race to shepherd civilians out of the north and south gates to limit the damage and pitch the plan to Bertram's company. At the north gate, bandits masquerading as adventurers stand guard alongside the vigilantes. Trust me, if they lead this operation, they'll take the hits and emerge with a hard-earned, razor-sharp grasp of the situation. Even if they tore their hair out trying, the villagers can't muster a better option and are forced to accept the plan. They must not only scramble a new strategy, but hurl every fighter to the front, a burden the villagers can't shoulder, and she is Frank. The countdown's lit. It's time to wind things up. Maybe they'll swing by the head, and then the guys will roar off down the road. They spring into action under the plan. He, Alicia, Karina, Dennis, and Frida take their positions with the head claws at the south gate, bracing to meet the bandits' assault. Captain Jeffrey plants the main escort force in the village center, primed for speed so they can surge to either flank and strike back the moment trouble erupts. He can't gauge how strong their magic armor is. Even a Desert Eagle won't land a killing blow. He could unleash a massive caliber rifle. But with no clue which face hides the B-rank mage, he can't start gunning everyone down just because one of them might refuse one of these mages. Or you could unleash a submachine gun barrage and finish off the rest with a huge caliber rifle. Is that a good idea? Magic armor lets light, air, and sound slip right through it. You could try sleeping gas. The cat's got me cornered. It wants to play again. The plan's a sham. The device shrieked to life. Got it. Their true target is Bertram's company. The guy mouthed an apology to the cat. They'll play later. Shock slammed into him. He realized the plan was a sham, and he loved it. They were vigilantes, the goal a lie, and this was exactly how they'd act. Pete was right. Their real target was Bertram's caravan company. The village could wait, but hitting Bertram's scattered caravan was a once-in-a-lifetime shot, so they zeroed in on the caravan's cargo, valuable as it was, and their commander wanted Bertram captured. If anyone can conjure Bertram's head, it's Pete, and Joseph can too. They slide a sealed letter into the vigilantes' hands, laying out every detail of their recent plan. Then they storm the north gate. I wonder what they'll do after that. So you'd think that if Bertram didn't have to keep his company in the village center, he'd yank every man and hurl them at the vigilantes, right? Don't be naive. They'd just cram even more troops into the center. They shove the main forces into the center and post the toughest minions beside the leader. Warriors who can take on top opponents alone and make split-second calls in a crisis. If they pull this off, everything clicks into place. And with the boss at their side, it's been ages since they faced real rivals. Stop Joseph from torching them, because that man wouldn't hesitate to burn Joseph to ash. Make them stop or they'll torch everyone here, no doubt. If it's them, the victory's already sealed in their hands, and yeah, they don't look like them. Because each of them was a real soldier, and even more convinced they'd have to use them, the men hardened into cold, deadly focus. Stash a trump card in reserve. Play it safe. Decision sealed. Tell Alion and his men they'll strike the North Gate tomorrow night. Then write and send a forged letter outlining a fake plan. We have to hammer out a letter that spells out every minute detail, and the strike is locked in for tomorrow night. Pete had warned them yesterday they'd attack the village tonight, and with the attackers about to leave, they sprinted to Mr. Daichi, pressing him to see them. Captain Jeffrey intercepted the bandits' plans. The head demands an immediate briefing with them, and the guys arriving any second. The bandits will descend on the village tonight. Patrolmen seized a suspicious adventurer. A search turned up a letter addressed to the raiders who'd entered the village. It showed they'd learned a partisan detachment was stationed in the village center. They're out for blood. They aim to kill the vigilantes, pouring every ounce of strength into a lightning-fast assault to annihilate them and seize the North Gate. They've zeroed in on them as the next target. The people realized they couldn't crush them all, so they vowed to hunt them down and pick them off one by one. This scheme's fit for bandits. It's doomed without steady command like the army or the night order. So why are they even being assembled here? He won't let the bandits run wild. The partisan detachment's been alerted and is already racing to the vigilantes. I want them to rush to the North Gate now and help drive back the attack. He falls in line with the order. The head opts to remain here with the merchants, and the girl pleads to be allowed at least to stay by his side. The man boomed with iron confidence. Every employee at our company can do something. Don't worry. Knowing baby Karina's still out there steels them for battle, so they're urged to accept the girl's offer. 5 rank mages lurk with the bandits. Drag her out of the fight and the damage will explode. That's their plan. Freeze any decision. Mr. Klaus must hear the man first. Let him speak now. This could be urgent. That's right. Don't let them gut Southgate's defenses. Can one guy's speech really sway a man's opinion? If he listens, he'll hear it's all a hoax. The man planted the device on the table. It hissed, then spoke. They deliberately set the attack's details loose to bait Bertram's company into a trap, and everyone gasped, stunned by what they heard. A human voice cut through the air. Yes. He'd grasped every detail. When they move, the bandit's real plan snaps into place. Confusion slammed into him. He blurted, "What kind of tool is that?" Then stopped himself. It doesn't matter now. This conversation has him drowning in questions. He stashed the device in the forest a kilometer south of the village while they were pursuing the bandits. That conversation happened just recently, and they'd already been warned the bandits were coming. News hit like a thunderclap. The head learned a battle raged at the North Gate. Panic rippled through everyone. They fired a skyward signal. Voices shouted, "What do we do now?" And then one man shot his hand up, calm and fierce, declaring he had a plan. Plant your hand on the table and watch. Turn the bandits' own tactic against them. They'll come from the south, swing around to flank, and ambush the road between the southern forest and the gate. Everything has to fall into place. To pull it off, you must fool the bandits into believing their plan is unfolding exactly as they expect. First, they stage a ruse. Everyone will believe the southern forces were sent to the North Gate, but the troops, the 4 and Alicia among them, will stay with the caravan while disguised civilians slip north in their stead. Then Headcloth will stride into the square and plant himself, posing as the lone guardian of the gate. He's the bait. They, joined by Karina, Dennis, Frida, and Alicia, slip around the bandits' flank and strike without warning. Even if their surprise attack flopped, it could steal the Headclaws the precious seconds to reach the village center. Yet it was a suicide-level gamble. The bandits are about to strike. Any moment now. Do we even have time to weigh the risks? They're heading straight for the South Gate. So why don't they just pull everyone back? This won't work, someone snapped. The man folded his arms and scoffed, and she believes the bandits will arrive long before any help. Rally them in the village center to stall until the northern squad arrives. Could Bertram's company, even with the vigilantes stuck at the North Gate, crush 60 bandits and the 5 rank mages just not interfere? She was right. Pride burned bright in her. But nagging doubts still lurked at the edge. Even if fighting was the only threat, doubt coiled in her gut. She couldn't imagine the head ever approving his plan. Even if they somehow corralled every last one into the center, the bandits' plan was to snatch the Headclaws. Don't forget, the civilians down south are still trapped and haven't been evacuated. The girl dropped her head and silence swallowed her. They sized up their slim chance of beating the bandits. One guy clutched a secret weapon and proclaimed it with iron certainty. His weapon can annihilate 60 bandits in a single strike, 5 of them ranked magicians, because he wields mass destruction magic or a magic tool with the same devastating power. He could drop people without killing them, and everyone begged to know how. Drop them, not kill them. But you can't be so careless. He underestimates his opponents far too much. Nobody would believe a lone man could take on 60 bandits. The wildest part is he walks away alive. Spot on. But he's itching to know exactly how this guy's going to pull it off, so can you break your idea down step by step? He relented. The other man had refused to show it earlier, but nothing would work without it. So the dark-haired man will reveal every secret of the weapon. Head Clows demanded Alicia be suspended from the operation, but then she conceded it was smarter to use the attacker outside the village, and after that, Head Clues retreated. Everyone's faces gave it away. Alicia's specialty is a ranged combat spell, the girl said. Then she leaned in and snapped, "Listen, is he sure everything will go smoothly? He knows a simple explanation won't convince everyone. If Head Claws labels it too dangerous, they can leave him, and the dark-haired man will deal with it himself. If the first stage collapses, you trigger the second." At the second stage, the girl blasted a storm of magic at the opponents alongside him, and he froze, jaw dropping at the offer. She refused to let them be left without the dark-haired man. The second stage stalled and wouldn't start. The girl swore she'd stick with him to the end. If they failed, they'd all leave together, even carrying the corpses. Don't panic. He's heard the whispers about his talent. But whether he can steel himself against any foe is anyone's guess, so never drop your guard. The girl sees Mr. Daichi as a top-tier magician, but the guy? He's got 0 combat experience, right? Over and over, brilliant magicians fell to a small bandit because inexperience betrayed them, each one undone by the same deadly overconfidence. How cruel. In his homeland, they declare, "Know yourself and your enemy, and you won't dread the outcome of 100 battles." What does that mean? The line thundered that if someone doesn't know their own strength or their enemies, victory will be yours even after 100 battles. That's the point. Mr. Daichi was clearly well-read, and the girl caught the gist. They've cracked the enemy's playbook, their decisive edge, and they weaponize that very scheme against its creators. She caught every word, but that didn't justify the dark-haired man's recklessness. It screamed danger. They dismiss him as a naive boy. Sure, he didn't plan any of this, and though real-world experience might be thin, his mind crackles with enough knowledge. He devoured books, novels, and short stories and binged dramas, shaping a strategic mind that outclassed other students. When the first battle arrived, he felt no fear. He relished the chance to test his skill. They're a kilometer away. Alarms scream for everyone to get ready. Alicia slams on physical reinforcements and steals her defenses. All that's left is to wait for them to close in. A sharp command snaps at them to stop. Flanking the bandits are 6 royal monkeys. They face relentless opponents and surge forward. Now we must act. From how the royal monkeys shifted and darted, whispers spread that some hidden hand was pulling their strings. Yes, those royal monkeys are monstrous war beasts, unleashed as frontline fighters. Out of roughly 66 bandits, about 6 are royal monkeys, and that spells disaster. They flood the battlefield far beyond expectations. 6 royal monkeys in tow, and a breathless messenger screams for Karina to fall back. The bandits surged forward, and with no cover to fall back behind, he threw himself into the breach to stall them while the others sprinted to report to Klaus. Outnumbered, it didn't derail their plan. Cut the nonsense. They're far more numerous than the guys expected. Load more shells. Their number won't interfere in any way. She insisted she'd stay with Daichi, while Lady Alicia was asked to wait. The village nullified her attack magic, but her body-strengthening enchantment kicked in, and she matched his pace like she was glued to his heels. She led the squad with an iron hand, both of them forced to obey her. The opponent started 700 meters away, and she was warned that at that pace no one would get far. She plants her feet and dials Dennis and Frida, asking to stay with them and help. They lock in, banking everything on Daichi's plan. 600 meters on the clock, then the signal blares, 500 meters to go. At about 200 meters, they're close. The man can already pick them out. If the dark-haired guy gets time to ready the assault rifles and the plan to neutralize them collapses, they're inside firing range. Illegal but still used by armies worldwide, stun grenades, light and sound flashbangs, are hurled into crowds to suppress foes hiding among civilians, their blinding flash and thunderous blast ripping away sight and hearing for a few brutal seconds. A searing, blinding flare slammed into everyone there, striking each person and leaving them reeling. He clamped his eyes shut for a long beat. When he opened them, he spun around and saw people bleeding. The blinding light had scorched everyone's eyes. They snapped their eyes open. He demanded, "What is it?" "Bandits." There they were, which explained why everyone was splayed on the ground. "Who is this Daichi? Why aren't the guys hauling the bandits in now?" One of them insists they need time to acclimate to cripple the bandits' movement. Tap the network and lock them down. Being cautious won't hurt. One of the monsters erupted into a savage growl. The dark-haired man froze, stunned and blindsided. Then the beast lunged forward to attack. The girl yells at Daichi to duck as the reptiles snap at anything, their own or someone else's, and wild with worry, she frantically orders everyone to fall back. He smacked both hands against his face to jolt his focus and barked that everything was fine. The battle was in full swing. The sword-wielding girl charged the monster, slashing to wound her foe. The beast growled, and the monkey's enchanted armor made it immune to fire too. She couldn't finish the monster. Daichi was told to step aside, but the guy charged in, ready to attack, yelling, "Leave the monkey to me!" "Great. We're outgunned. We don't have enough large-caliber rifles to take them down." He spun around, eyes blazing, and vowed he'd take care of the king monkeys. Magic roared to life in his palm, and Daichi blasted it at the monkey. The blast tore into the monster, carving a deep scar as blood poured from its mouth, and it crumpled, defeated. It was jaw-dropping. The monkey crumpled from a single crushing blow. Daichi radiated raw power. The monsters were all snarling. The guy punched another one square in the head, and he barked that 3 were still left. Fire at the mouth and the bullet rips clean through, but shots that slam into the body embed and won't come out. The body's magic armor is far tougher than it looked. It was magic armor, and he ripped through it with shocking ease. When it came that close to them, his heart hammered like a war drum. But now Daichi feels none of that rush. The urge to take monsters' lives has vanished. Their lives hung in the balance, yet he stood unnervingly calm. Only 2 beasts remained. The royal monkeys swarmed Daichi. He and Karina had to face the bandits, and the guy just shrugged. "Whatever you say." The guy unleashed a savage swing. The last one bolted, and Daichi watched as the king monkey began tearing into someone. That's all. Gunfire screamed toward them. Daichi lunged and shoved the girl at his side out of the line of fire. It all unfolded in a heartbeat. The shot tore toward the guy. She screamed, "No!" and everyone spun, worry snapping to the dark-haired man. The blow slammed into Daichi, siphoning his strength as the guys barreled forward to grab their ally while he toppled to the ground and they screamed his name. A guttural grunt ripped from him as more shells slammed in after the first. "This is bad, we've got to act now." Daichi is weak, but fierce conviction burns in him. That guy has to succeed. He looks up and sees a girl planted right in front of him, bracing and shielding her body from the hail of projectiles, and he roars at Alessia to stop. More attackers flooded in and voices screamed, "We need to retreat!" She scooped Daichi into her arms and they curled together against the onslaught as she hissed, "We have to put more distance between us." He lay sprawled on the ground, eyes locked on Alicia as he gasped, "Any wounds? Any burns?" She thanked him with a relieved smile and said she was fine. Her enhancement magic had protected her. He forgot the magic armor. Everything was going so smoothly that Daichi shoved it from his mind, and his maddening scatterbrain backfired. In this battle, only the dark-haired one is to blame. Daichi fought to his feet. "We have to get to Karina and the others. First, stop the bleeding and dress the wounds. He's fine. Now we go after the bandits." Worry carved the girl's face. How can you say that with wounds like those? First treatment, no options. Everything seemed hopeless. Daichi fixed his gaze on the wound, and it had already knit itself shut. How was that possible when the guy didn't prolong his physical strengthening? Nick hunkered beneath the man's clothes as spiritual water magic thrummed around him. Power enough to stitch torn tendons, while higher-rank spells could close wounds ripped open by a fireball. "Mr. Daichi, what can use water magic? That's a high-rank spell," the girl gasped, shock pinning her to the spot. Shame scorched his cheeks. He's clearly not that skilled. With no problems left to stall them, they lock onto the bandits and the guys plunge into another fight. No sight, no hearing. They must be tracking opponents with magic, and that's exactly why they're B-rank mages. He spun to Karina, Dennis, and Frida, apologized for dragging them into the fight, and vowed he'd handle it alone, determination burning in the dark-haired man's eyes. "Get Daichi somewhere safe!" the man roared as he ripped into his opponents. The dark-haired man just smirked and tossed out no offense, even if it killed him. Even if. The battle raged as they traded parries and strikes, unleashing magic. One fighter ripped earth from the ground and chunks of stone erupted into the air. His face was stone cold. He needed a vault. Daichi sprang from the place of defeat and charged straight into battle. Daichi's strikes slammed into the men. They groaned in pain, and one bandit dropped to the ground before curling his lips into a smile. A man lurked behind a curtain of smoke as Daichi thrust his hand to strike. Then he spotted an enemy, yanked his arm back, and abandoned the attack, so the guy slipped out of reach. As the attack tore through the air, everyone locked eyes. A guy had a cat poking its head out from under his clothes. Then Daichi fired a crackling bolt of magic, and the nearby girls watched it all unfold. His wounds were still fragile, but Daichi unleashed a torrent of water magic and mended every last one. It's healed. I'm not kidding. Healed. Was it Alicia? No, Mr. Daichi forced himself back to health. He did it himself. Himself. So there's no problem, right? The dark-haired man said cheerfully. But the girl was too upset. Daichi felt her worry slam into him. The girl screamed, clawing at his clothes, and the dark-haired man met her gaze and apologized. He snapped that their glorious quarrel must wait. They had to sprint after the bandits. He had a mountain of questions for her, but catching bandits came first, and then his ally abruptly let go, sending him crashing painfully to the ground. She snapped, "Exactly. Tie them up now before they come to their senses," then shrugged. "We'll talk later. It'll be a long conversation, but that doesn't matter," and admitted she was furious with Daichi. She snaps again, declaring she's angry. Daichi apologizes, having almost driven her to tears. The guy is truly sorry. He won't have to worry anymore, the dark-haired man promises. He kept pouring apologies into a quietly furious Alicia as Karina and the others trussed up the ruthless bandits. They showed no mercy. And Daichi's words rang, "Know yourself and your opponent, and you can win any battle, right?" He had zero clue about this opponent. Daichi disastrously miscalculated the B-rank mage's power and totally blanked on the magic armor. The instant he went down, my mind went blank. All I could cling to was that second as goosebumps raced over my skin and a cold sweat broke out. Daichi felled the king monkey with a single shot. She still can't believe it. The guy had bragged he could handle the bandits, and he actually tore through them and put them all down. He didn't expect the enemy in magic armor to erupt into a rampage. The dark-haired man fixed his focus on the spell. Daichi took a brutal hit, and the mages didn't freeze. They surged forward in a desperate all-out attack. Daichi tore through every mage in the room in seconds, recovered in a heartbeat while others fended off the attacks and finished them off before anyone could react. The dark-haired man waved off the praise and told them to stop. Daichi's absurdly talented. He wants to fall into a hole. The guy's so mortified he actually becomes a girl. He'd instantly fall headfirst in love with the dark-haired man. Does she agree with him? The move might land, but have they already forgotten how the guy dropped his guard? The dark-haired man shrugged off the wound. It was nothing, and he wasn't injured. Daichi apologized, admitting there was no excuse for his carelessness. If Nick hadn't been with him, the man would already have leaned back. His water magic erupts, far too powerful. They're pleading with the girl to stop. The country keeps its trump cards hidden. Daichi forces out an apology, and a forbidden secret lingers, unsayable. They'll drag him to the village's south square. The 5 will go with the girl. If the bandits try to flee, they'll execute him on the spot. The knights arrive 4 days after the bandits are captured. While this unfolded, the vigilantes hauled the bandits in and forced a confession. They'd been the ones behind the goblin influx. Another theory sparked. The bandits commanded monsters so flawlessly they might be soldiers of a feudal lord or a foreign army, but there was no way to confirm it. Only that 2 thieves and 5 ranked magicians had come from other countries. Headclaws warned an aristocrat's rule would pin them down, but an army of neighbors would be worse. City magicians could be sent to rob, and the borders were dangerously thin. He believed this country was peaceful, until the border's trouble slammed into view. Villagers sent the departing cart on its way while everyone waved goodbye. The cat let out a plaintive meow. They called out a warm good morning to him. Daichi saw the pet had slept soundly. Today they had the chance to spend the night in a hotel. At last, you could get a real night's sleep. A girl caught the dark-haired man's eye. This was the city of Karam. Daichi had no clue Kurama ranked second only to Bailan among border towns. Bertram's company will be stationed there for 10 days, and its perfect location plus rock-bottom prices make it a merchant's jackpot. The road to the capital devours 10 days. Bertram's company will hunker down in Karam for 10 more, so they'll reach the capital in 20 days. Headclaw swore he'd escort her only as far as Karam, but the capital was already beckoning him. Alicia offered to stay with her in Karam, and Daichi, sticking to his original plan, vowed to open his shop there. From their very first meeting, he vowed to open a shop in a place where trade would spill across several countries at once. Something real snapped into motion. Daichi's almost certain he altered the settings, and at last the dream will come true as the girl prays for the guy's success. As long as he stayed a street vendor, unless she suddenly threw some absurd event into the mix. The girl burned with fierce curiosity about what outrageous stunt she'd pull next. A dark-haired man is about to hawk a product that somehow cleared their approval in Santa Claus, but every detail screams shady, and the girl refuses to trust him. Is this really about trust, or something darker? Fear seizes her. Daichi could try something reckless on his own. Alicia insists he comes off like a small child, even though he's hardly one. Yeah, the kids are a breeze. Mr. Daichi is charging forward with reckless abandon. Bertram's company will be in town for 10 days, and that's the truth. While they were here, Daichi practically buzzed, eager for them to help set up the shop and hand over any advice. The scent of delicious sweets sends the first girl charging in to help. The other rushes in, too. She can't refuse a treat. She spurred her horse alongside the cart where the guys sat, and they rolled through the city with everyone grinning ear to ear from the conversation. The street thrummed with people as Daichi plunged down the stairs, ripped out a lazy stretch after sleep, forged ahead, while Mick peeked from beneath his hood. She mouthed God twice. Then a fresh scent hit her, a new customer, and the room snapped alive. Daichi reached out and clasped the man's hand, thanking him for his unwavering help, convinced the products they'd entrusted to him would ignite a craze across the royal capital, and daring to hope their cooperation would last more than a year. At last, Bertram's company's 10-day break in Karam ended. They're already barreling toward the royal capital, and he burst into tears, gasping, "The guys will miss you!" The girl sent him a hearty wish for luck with the shop's opening. Daichi thanked him, vowing to keep growing his business in this city and, the instant he feels confident, to move straight to the capital. Don't rush. That same violin was far more suited to business than the capital. A girl smacked him and said, "Well, let him not talk too much." And pain shot through him. Bailan erupts as the largest trading city in the border territories, fusing 4 countries and 4 thunderous trade routes into one chaotic crossroads, and stands as Neuendorf's second-largest city. It promises more excitement than the capital, but don't run ahead. She warned Karina to take care of herself. The guy's going to miss you. If he gets mixed up again, she'll be powerless to help and fear gnaws at her. Daichi locked eyes and said, "She's cruel, isn't she? Now remember this. The careless blunder during the Bandit capture, or that village night when Daichi goaded an entire gang into a brawl. The girl remembers every detail. She wants to keep going, but the dark-haired man decided to stop her. The guy caught on. Let him go." Daichi yanked the cat out and gripped it by the paws. The man said, "Come on, just do it already. Make sure the dark-haired man stays on his guard." Saichi struts like he can bulldoze out of any scrape, and she can spot the boy's talent instantly. This place is still totally foreign to him. Back in the city, Daichi will have to pin his fate on it. If the goods he entrusted to the company sell like wildfire, they'll have to hand over a cut of the sales on the spot. Demand will spike. They'll need fresh shipments, so they dispatch a caravan, and Tarina joins as one of its defenders. She yearned to see Daichi strike out on his own, and they reached out, locking hands in a firm, hopeful shake. Some cakes sit here. Tell them to race and gobble them down before they spoil. The girl burst into pure joy over the sweets. The man pressed the question again. Mr. Daichi snapped, "Cakes!" And the girl turned to Mr. Eskikura to ask if that could work for these two. Daichi swore he'd sell them to every stratum of society, and that audacious claim ignited confidence the business would skyrocket. Even the royal family would crave them if they could eat them every day. The cakes rot with time. Anyone who bites into an old one ends up sick with food poisoning, and Daichi's name is ruined. If an aristocrat grabbed that cake, they'd brand him an attempted poisoner. Horror crashed over the room. The flaw gaped like an open wound, heartbreaking, and yet everyone buzzed with excitement. This was the perfect excuse to visit Mr. Daichi again. Heat flooded her face as she tried to blurt something while they were leaving. The girl reached to answer, but the words died on her tongue. Well, they wouldn't see each other for 2 months. Then she'd finally see how Daichi had grown. They traded one last wave, and she shouted, "I can't wait!" That's how he and Karina parted. And for 10 days, he and Bertram's company prowled the city, scanning street signs for a rental they could turn into their workshop. The job they took is finished. The Merchant Guild reached Daichi yesterday. Alicia's been slammed these last few days, practically buzzing to team up with the Chamber of Commerce. And after all this time, the dark-haired man stands utterly alone. The cat meowed, and Daichi's apology tumbled out as he swore he'd build a special cat house in their new house for the pet. Nick purred. Bertram's company had stashed away enough money earmarked for Daichi's business to buy him a house, mostly in thick stacks of checks, and he pocketed a share of the bounty for catching the bandits, enough to let him live utterly carefree for a while. Time to live completely carefree. Just a month ago, he was desperately hunting for a job in Japan, and now Daichi stands here. The change is cosmic, and life in another world is absolute bliss. At the Merchant Guild, his reliable assistant, Nick meowed, burst out from under his clothes as the guy flung the door open and shouted hello while people sat at the table. The girl called out hello to Mr. Asakura, who flashed a good morning at Melissa. Melissa, the woman who handled the purchase of the dark-haired man's new house and the merchant shop. She beckons us into the second-floor room. Everything's already set. The conversation won't stop at the property sale. Melissa presses to nail down a few details, and Tai Chi fires, "Which ones?" At Rento Forest by the South Gate, people were unleashing attack magic. No one had heard whispers about it yet, and this was the first time he'd ever heard of such power. Rento Forest crouches at the city's edge, a hunting ground where novice and mid-tier adventurers clash, while townsfolk scavenge mushrooms along the rim and never dare step into its shadowed depths. If that's true, brace for trouble from those people. Regular folks go there too, and the girl said they got a tip that Daichi was spotted at the scene. A complaint landed on their desk, and the guy pleaded for a little time. Daichi had been honing attack spells out in the deep forest where civilians never venture, and he'd even seen other mages training there. A wind mage swept in, and Daichi exploded with excitement. The mage was a girl who trained perched atop a swaying tree. Novice and apprentice magicians get a pass. Their harmless spells can't hurt anyone. Mr. Asakura backs that up, and Melissa was right. She'd warned him. The complaint they received described attacking magic fierce enough to rip a century-old tree from the ground. She zeroes in on Daichi's grenade launcher. If a rookie can wield a spell like that, the guy swore he couldn't. So Melissa snaps a warning to be careful from now on. The dark-haired man leans in, intrigued, and that's all. She clutched a scrap of paper as Daichi shot. "Anything else?" His second question struck straight at trading monster materials and magic stones. He could hawk off every single thing he owned. "Small amounts," he says. And Melissa snapped, menace crackling in her voice. "Where does the guy see a small amount here? Where did he even snag this?" That tiny skirmish aside, materials and magic stones are their lifeblood. Huge trades run through the guilds, and the Adventurers Guild supplies most of it. So even ignoring Daichi's mistake, when has a street vendor ever been carrying this much stock? Today, Daichi threw open the doors of his own shop. No more street hawking, but you can't move that much stock while sidestepping the Adventurers Guild. He'd never heard that rule before. This item deserved a spot in the cooperation terms. Melissa froze in shock. It looked like he had been there. They sat inches apart across the tea table. "Doesn't Daichi know this?" The girl pressed her hands to her face. "Well, he's a foreigner after all. Picture a regular person who only needs a few everyday materials, magic items for daily use or goods you can flip for profit. If he stockpiled too many, he'd hawk the extras, leaving roughly this much. She confirmed it was far less than Daiichi's, barely a pittance, then paused and looked away with a sly grin while the dark-haired man kept his hood drawn. At the third point, everyone claimed Mr. Asakura had joined the Magicians Guild. A lie. He never registered, and they demanded to know why. She'd nailed it. A grin burst across her face. "Can you really register with other guilds while you're already a member?" she gasped, and Melissa snapped firmly. "They have no rule forbidding it." Melissa begged, "If anything doesn't make sense, ask me, always." As the girl began to whimper, the dark-haired man tensed, worry written on his face as he stared at her and pressed a hand to his cheek. He suddenly vowed he'd consult Melissa before making any move so she wouldn't have to cry, and she lifted her head, wiped her tears, and slowly steadied herself. Melissa slammed her head down on the table again. The man exploded with excitement, shouting her name as she grabbed the dark-haired man's clothes and let him register with the Guild of Magicians. Daiichi understood. He'll go there and do it, and Melissa pressed on, insisting she's going with him. Before they hand over the materials, the guys rush to the Guild of Magicians. Melissa frantically wipes tears from her face, completely overwhelmed, and Parquet forces himself calm, settling a steady hand on her back. She tells Mr. Asakura she understands he's from another country and doesn't know much, but his dark-haired nonchalance pricks at her. Will she brood on it? The two of them stride down the street. She snapped at Daiichi, cupping her hand and jabbing a finger at the dark-haired man. If he doesn't know something, he better ask. From now on, he runs everything by her. Her voice trembled as she gasped. "I absolutely have to do this." Daiichi swore he'd do it, then suddenly crumpled to his knees and choked out a sincere apology. Don't go that far. He's practically drowning in apologies, tied to Bertram's company, and Melissa blew it, brushing off the details because she figured Daiichi had already explained everything. Melissa started hauling the heavy man up. He was a dead weight, but the crucial thing was he finally knew. Someone could call for help, but Daiichi had to pull himself off his knees, and the girl grabbed his hand and led him away. A guy shouted Melissa's name. She snapped, "Quiet." Everything seemed fine, but Daiichi couldn't look away from that question. What exactly had grabbed him? All eyes snapped to them. The guys will go. Then a thought hits Daiichi. He calls Melissa over, presses a sweet into her hand and urges her to take it. A lollipop from Daiichi's homeland lit her face with joy, but when she tried to bite it, it wouldn't fit. It's meant to be licked. Melissa froze in horror while we kept licking because it's unbearably sweet. The girl dove into the treat with pure glee, sticky and saccharine, nothing like ordinary sweets. Daiichi's face lit up when he saw she loved it, and Melissa whirled around to snap about the payment. Wait, aren't they friends? Daiichi's their biggest customer, clutching that dazzling lollipop. What's it going to cost him? Back then, the guy wanted Melissa as a friend, but Asakura snatched the other girl's hand. What? Her hands were overflowing with sweets Daiichi shoved into them, but he slapped one demand on the deal. Keep helping him, and it's free. Could that really be true? Melissa thanked him for the gift. Like Karina, she's easily bribed with sweets, and a grin began to bloom on her face. Let's move on now. Even if Daiichi screws up, no one's going to be very angry. She kept licking her sweets like nothing was wrong as Daiichi plunged alone into the forest. The guy, a lollipop bobbing in his mouth, narrowed his eyes and confirmed the dark-haired man really was alone. Melissa knew it. If Bertram had been flanked by one of his men, no one would have kicked up this fuss. Make no mistake. Later he'll risk asking someone out, but he and Alicia won't cross paths anytime soon, and he can't confide in Melissa. A girl then snapped at the dark-haired man, demanding to know what he knows about the Guild of Magicians. They're hired as escorts into the forest, plunging into the wild to snatch up wear materials, and they even recruit adventurers' guild members to join the expeditions. So that's it, the girl said sharply. Most adventurers who take escort jobs into the forest are low-ranked. You barely have to step past the tree line to gather, so low-ranked adventurers laugh it off and live worry-free. A month ago, Melissa would have nodded along with the guy, but there's one thing. This month, something might have befallen the forest. In Rento Forest, something incredible erupted. A girl stood stone serious and left it unfinished, and a sound ripped out from the shopping street. Daichi's jaw clenched. He was going there, period. The girl froze, blurted, "Wait!" and mumbled. Then she still decided to follow him, sprinting after him and shouting that the dark-haired man should wait. He spotted a crowd swelling in the distance. Daichi's brow tightened, questions snapping through his mind. The two charged into the shopping street. Daichi spotted a familiar figure in the crowd and shouted for Granny. She gasped, spun toward his voice, recognized the dark-haired man and breathed. "So it's you, boy." He then reminded Granny of his name. They don't know each other. The granny runs the shop next door. They met just 4 days ago, so here's a quick, punchy rundown of Daichi's consecutive days. He clashed with a rival in Karam, sealed a sale in the forest, cleared the merchant guild formalities, parted ways with Karina, and then came our time. Still, because it was already a little late today, she warned that every seat next to Grandma had been snatched up. Daichi's clueless about what's going on, but he shrugs. It doesn't look that bad, so he's game. The guy says he's got the day off, but with weather this perfect, it screams that Asakura's broke. Grandma saw with her own eyes how well he was doing. By month's end, he'd raked in enough for a vacation, and the girl, panic rising, blurted her fears at him. He's sloshing around like cheese melting in hot butter, and the other guys seethe with envy. They want Daichi to share a little with them. Awesome. Those old men have their eyes locked on Daichi. "Can I rile them up a bit?" he asked. "They're buzzing about him. Who are they? Maybe they're the new merchants." Grandma snapped to shut Daichi up before he babbled. Those thugs barged in without asking and started demanding protection money. "They're just common thugs," Asakura muttered, pressed a hand to his face. It might fail, but it should still work. The map is ancient and cracked. Ignore his brother's ramblings. The man leans in and suggests a private talk. Her single exhale curdles the air and freezes everyone. He flashed a broad grin and declared he had a mountain of tasks to clear, so he'd blitz through them fast. Unlike these guys, everyone here was buried in serious, no-nonsense work. Rage flared in the man's eyes as Daichi shoved forward. The other lunged to hold his friend back and snarled that the guy would have been better off keeping quiet. They can't pull this off fast. It'd be a tragedy if the man missed watching Daichi writhe. He whipped out a knife and pressed the blade to the dark-haired man's throat. And when the brother realizes everyone's panicking, the girl stares, her face raw with worry for her friend. It all came down to Daichi. He stood stone-cold calm as danger closed in, and a man recoiled, aghast, snapping, "What's wrong with him?" They screamed at him to stay away. He stared at the woman, baffled. What's wrong with her? Does she remember the townspeople? This can't be good. Then he barked, "Hey you," at the old man, balled his hand into a fist and snarled that everything depends on him. Daichi slammed his swing into the band at the heart. The recoil hurled the man to the ground, and Asakura launched into another ferocious attack. One of the bandits rocketed off and crashed into the ones behind him. Daichi swung again and barked, "Another one!" Melissa, worried, drew the guy's attention to something, and Mr. Asakura turned around. He was blasted into the air, thudded back to the ground, and everyone gasped. Then the dark-haired man froze when he locked eyes with a familiar face, Alicia. She knew Mr. Daichi was always at the center of trouble, but he snapped that it wasn't so, and that the dark-haired man was the real victim. He said it again. Amazing. The men went wild at the new arrival, roaring cheers as someone cried that Daichi had wiped them out while the bandits lay crumpled on the ground, groaning. Daichi loomed over the criminals and demanded to know what they'd do next. Maybe the men wanted to keep talking. The bandits suddenly tensed. "It's a wizard, oh no," Daichi snapped. "Maybe they want those people to pay the bandits for security." And the old men froze, fear cracking their voices as they stammered, "No, they're already leaving." Grandma slapped a proud hand on his back and said he'd done well. Everyone knew Daichi was a wizard, but seeing someone that powerful, Alicia's gaze snapped to Granny. The woman's face snapped when she recognized Alicia. The guy's jaw dropped, and Alicia flared, barking at her grandmother to stop risking herself and demanding what would happen if she were interrupted. Yet the girl would still lecture her. Daichi gaped. Alicia was her granddaughter. Then the family tree flipped. The great-granddaughter turned out to be the girl's great-grandmother. Amazement crashed over them, and the world felt tiny. She froze as Asakura stood up for her grandmother and voices demanded, "What is Alicia about? Mr. Daichi is here, utterly alone." Worry knotted in the girl's chest. He's barreling into trouble again, alone. The dark-haired one walks with a man from the Merchant Guild today. He froze when he noticed Melissa missing and bellowed her name. Melissa stood wide-eyed until a friend barreled up, panting apologies and saying she'd been handling the guild's affairs on the shopping street. "It's settled now, we can go." His grandmother thanked him for saving him, and later vowed to thank Daichi properly. But Daichi brushed it off and refused, saying it wasn't worth it. She leveled a steely glare over her glasses and declared Daichi's overblown modesty utterly unbecoming. Alicia leaned in and whispered she couldn't sway her grandmother, and Asakura, understanding, nodded and said, "See you later." Alicia shot the master a quick, hungry question about their next stop. Melissa announced she'd take him to the Wizards Guild, and Alicia froze, stunned by the words. He demanded to know why. The three of them hit the road, she had meant to tell them earlier, and over the past month, criminal adventurers had swelled across the country. This avalanche of trouble sent Melissa's blood racing with excitement. She noticed it too. He was convinced it looked exactly like this. The criminals had stockpiled weapons and declared the profession that spanned all worlds abandoned. Adventurers from abroad are pouring in like a storm, not just low-ranked rookies, but mid-ranked fighters whose origins are completely unknown. Even if Daichi files an escort request with the guild, you can still get saddled with rotten escorts. The second a real powerhouse appears, they panic and sprint off, leaving every cart in the dust. Bolting might seem safe, but it could toss them into the jaws of bandits, or worse, expose them as the bandits themselves, a painful twist we've seen before. The guild's a cracked fortress. Catch one bandit and they'll be dragged into the light, their secrets laid bare. Melissa's voice cut through. Still, heading alone into the forest would be safer. As before, the guy had chosen wisely. A serious shadow crossed his face. Melissa continued. And that wasn't all. More and more people are vanishing, especially children, and Melissa seethes with fury. About 10 children have vanished in 2 weeks. Daichi stands stunned. The children are gone, and the girl believes they were kidnapped. The official tally lists only 10 missing children, include those from orphanages and slums, and the total at least doubles. It reeks of something sinister. Shadowy men prowl this building, snatching children above all. Adults get taken sometimes too. Mr. Asakura, a business partner in Bertram's company, sits on personal savings that could buy the whole store, so he's clearly set for life. The girl heard he had relatives abroad, and Daichi chuckled. He'd already caught Melissa's drift. Melissa fears they'll snatch Daichi too, but after witnessing his raw power, she admits he's blown past every expectation. They can ambush you in an instant. If they catch you off guard, Daichi's strength will be useless, the girl confirmed, right? It's too dangerous. You can't wander around alone anymore. Daichi feels danger coiling in the trees whenever he walks the forest alone. The girl demands to know if he can be trusted. The dark-haired man swears he'll be careful. Step into the forest and everything falls into place. But the Wizards Guild is a different beast. Its doors only open for recommendations from current members. Unlike adventurers, it runs on strict rules, so bring someone to accompany you. Daichi folded his arms as clarity slammed into him, and he began to think. This guild would be a different beast from the Adventurers Guild and its mercenaries. Alicia choked out an apology, but a mountain of tasks still loomed over her. Melissa snapped, "If you don't register with the guild, what then? Unregistered wizards go to jail? No exceptions." He snapped, "Who'll vouch for me?" And they fired back. "Karina Kears, head of Bertram, recommended Daichi." Recognition hit him like a jolt, and he blurted, "Karina?" Melissa burst into animated chatter. Karina is Count Curse's daughter and a magician, and a single endorsement from her can tip the ranks. The man folded his arms and pondered. This candy-devouring girl is an earl's daughter. He stood dumbfounded, stunned by the situation and by Daichi's support. She believes the Gilve could even dispatch an escort for the dark-haired man. Melissa caught sight of something and smiled. That's it. The boys rapped on the door and asked to be let in. Inside was far humbler than she had pictured. The Merchant Guild chased luxury while the wizards prized plain practicality. She smiled. and every face burned with curiosity about what waited inside. The company surged up to the counter. Melissa stepped forward and declared they had to register with the Mage Guild, the first step toward official registration. And the bespectacled clerk answered crisply. She whipped around to Mr. Asakura and declared she needed his letter of recommendation, then froze and stared at Daichi. She's talking about the envelope they gave the guy. Daichi's memory snapped into place. Ah, this was the recommendation letter in the guy's storage. The dark-haired man had handed it to the receptionist, who grabbed it and dove into it. Shock hit him as he read. Daichi had just scored a recommendation from Karina Kiers. He beamed thanks to Karinochka, and now Asakura was sure the girl really was the Count's daughter as the dark-haired man strode away. They flash a personal recommendation signed by the head of Bertram's trading company, asking the clerk behind Bertram's counter to take a look. Beyond Ms. Kiers' letter, 3 other magicians at the school penned recommendations. She's one of them, and those guys vouched for this guy. The head of Bertram's company, the Earl's daughter, and 3 high-ranking magicians snapped to attention. Who the hell is this guy? Melissa swept her gaze around, locked eyes with Daichi, and was utterly clueless. She knew nothing. Someone pressed a form into the dark-haired man's hands and rattled off questions. Place of residence? If Daichi won't write about it, leave that field blank. And when they asked if magic had to be listed, they waved it off. No, not necessary, while the dark-haired man kept filling it in. Daichi had already finished and slid the piece of paper to the person behind the counter. Perfect. The guy would be added to the lists. They thanked him for Asakura choosing this guild, so let him be satisfied. And then Nick suddenly meowed. The pet's paws started skittering. It's a cat. And the man at the front desk blurted he'd never seen one like this. Cute, right? Nick is insanely, unbelievably cute. What else is going to happen? What exactly is this animal? The receptionist barked. It's a cat. Definitely not a monster. It came from the other side of the continent. Then it suddenly shot into the air. But cats don't fly. Daichi pressed his hand to his pet. He worked for Bertram's company, teeming with B-rank mages. If that cat were a monster, someone would have spotted it ages ago, so yeah, that checks out. Check now. Has Daichi filled out everything? The receptionist skimmed the form and mumbled, Something might be wrong. The guy left almost everything blank, just name, gender, and family. So when Daichi was told not to answer awkward questions, he shrugged, filled the rest in, and dared them to check again. Red flags flared. He skipped the citizenship entry in the place of birth field, and even adventurers always fill those boxes. Daichi dug in his heels and refused to fill those fields. That's a major problem. The guy also balked at entering his citizenship and place of birth, so check with Melissa to see if you can ask him yourself. He flashed references from the trading company in Kierce County. The front desk man went pale and stammered that he couldn't question Daichi. Melissa snapped, annoyed too. Just register it and be done. And each extra question knotted the girl's nerves tighter and tighter. The front desk clerk dipped into a bow and declared, Oak, the man will be registered, so the guys are done with the case. And Daichi's left wondering if he can take over the shop now. Daichi's nerves flared. He rubbed his cheek with a trembling finger as they hinted this was far from over. Then the crowd demanded the guy prove his magic, and suddenly everything snapped into place. He's itching to pick the stage to unleash his magic. He'll cast attribute-less spells, so the tests set in the courtyard. Just the 2 of them going? If he doesn't mind, the girls will tag along. Melissa groaned at the hassle. Looks like everyone will go watch. He practically burst with delight, saying it didn't feel that roomy. And then Melissa's point hit him square. Practical, right? The girl gasped. This place drenches Daichi in nostalgia. Daichi asked, Is this Melissa's first time? Melissa admitted she'd only ever heard stories, never set foot here, and Asakura's brow tightened as he wondered which tales had reached her. He has to reveal his magic now. Daichi's power has no attributes. So first they'll slam the magic armor to test its strength, then they'll probe how the body's strengthening works, running several tests. Perched on the roof, a man loomed with a weapon clutched behind his back. A swordsman and Daichi's opponent, yet also a magician like Asakura, wielding attribute-less magic. They've rolled out a new one, Swordsman Allen, Examiner Daichi. But he can't fence. The sword's just a prop. The whole point is to play it dead serious so your magic looks believable. The man strode up, introduced himself, and shook hands. Daichi introduced himself too, admitting he'd only just taken up the sword and pleading, "Don't judge me harshly, don't be shy, strike with everything you've got, it'll be fine." Mr. Allen stands as a rank mage, jaw-dropping, yet a man sneered it was his only credit. She died, and she got the joke. Strap into the magic armor. If Lord Asakura can wield those training swords, unleash raw magic and smash the pillars. Even if Daichi manages to slash them, it's nothing. Tell the guy not to worry. Daichi snatched up a weapon and spoke, his voice cutting through the noise. The girls hurled Daichi forward with roaring support and shouted good luck to Mr. Asakura as a lone cat mewed in the distance. First, you must strike the leftmost post. The guy powered up, activating his body strengthening. Daichi snatched the sword and swung. The men watched in silence as he effortlessly toppled a single pillar, and the girlfriends erupted into praise for the dark-haired man. "Keep it up!" He kept proving his power, felled another pillar, then grabbed and swung the next like a wrecking ball as the crowd stared in awed admiration. Daichi surged forward, vaulted into the air, and cleaved another pillar. It split apart the instant his blade slammed into it. From the moment he set foot in Karam, he trained with Karina every single day, pouring countless hours into it. My friends exploded in cheers for Mr. Daichi. He did it, jaw-dropping. He split an iron pole with a wooden sword. Nick meowed nearby as the guy spun to the examiners and asked if this was enough. He demanded, "Are you done?" The man jabbed a finger at the chopped-up pillars and gaped at the result. Daichi snapped, "They told me to hit it, so I hit it. Maybe I got a little carried away." The receptionist scoffed and didn't believe me. He reels. Maybe Daichi hacked them crooked, but no. He can't fathom how a wooden sword could slice an iron pillar. Mr. roared for them to pummel the poles with all his might. Alicia heard it with her own ears. She heard him. But the command was to try to split a wooden pole. The copper pillar bristled with copper swords, and the iron pillar gleamed with steel blades. Each pillar held its own weapon, yet Daichi sliced through every single pillar with one wooden sword. Daichi sliced through them. That's what mattered. While the guy just hummed and asked, "So, sparring match?" The man slipped back and melted behind the exit doors. Daichi drove the examiner to tears. Alicia's face crumpled with pity. Nick snorted in surprise. The dark-haired man mumbled, "What do we do now?" He gaped, awe blazing in his voice. "C rank! His magic's at a C rank mage's level." Daichi passed, but the boy pegged the examiner as a B and slapped a C on the dark-haired man. C still carries clout, so you can roll with it. The bespectacled examiner snapped that he'd register Daichi as a C-rank mage on the spot. She stormed over and asked if he could even stand, though he'd be too ashamed to admit it. A cat then sprang at the receptionist, yowling and plastering his face with licks. "Taichi is a C-rank mage. The guy was handed a pendant, and it's insanely valuable. Don't let him lose it." Daichi shrugged and shot a casual "yeah," hoping the registration would speed up. This event was dragging on. Asakura leaned in and asked the girl if she was hungry. Then time slammed into him. It's already lunchtime, so he urged they put the task on hold and eat first. Melissa burst out, "My friend just opened his own restaurant. You can stop by right now." The guys whooped, and Daichi's grin split his face as he said yes. The guys burst into the market. It pulsed with life. Insults snapped through the air. They bought treats and beamed with pure joy. They swept past the counters, each piling their own plates as Melissa vowed to try everything here, because a quick snack on the go hit the spot and every bite tasted insanely good. They hover at the last stop. Outside the shop, Melissa mentioned, "It's the store of a friend. The girl's friend who owns it." She grins and shoots back, "Not really." A nun in the church pitches in to run the shelter stall. That kind child is tasked with doling out the budget, and Melissa jabbed a finger to the side and said, "Here it is." Melissa waved, spotted Fiona, and called her name. The girl recognized a friend, Fiona, though her face was completely hidden. The children barreled in to meet their little sister Melissa, but lunch was already over and very little was left. The moment the girl appeared, the kids zeroed in on Daichi and blurted, "Sister Melissa, did you find a boyfriend?" Panic flared in her. "No, he's not my boyfriend." And the children noticed the dark-haired man had no tail. Sister Melissa slipped past Sister Noon. Now forced to try God, Daichi shouted hello to the guys. They spotted Alicia. So she's the third extra. The guy was toying with Melissa. A child said it was better to forget, and the girl snapped as anger ignited. Melissa snapped that the man wasn't her boyfriend and nobody was playing around. He was a guild client. Fiona bowed low and apologized to the kids for being rude. Alicia shrugged. "It's okay. That's why they're kids." And Daichi blurted, "In what sense?" Melissa stammered an apology to Mr. Asakura. He snapped his head toward her as she blurted that they were children from the orphanage, Jack, Nina, Luca, and the rest. The girl swept Mr. Asakura forward, a shrewd merchant and a steady client of their merchant guild, then revealed Alicia, a mage of rank, as Melissa started introducing them to the guys. There she was, Sister Fiona, a flush of embarrassment rising on her cheeks, Melissa's childhood friend, now a nun in the church. She burst out a cheerful hello and announced her name. The girl lit up, meeting Mr. Asakura, and he felt it too. The guy stepped forward to introduce himself and Alicia, and a child cried, "Nun!" to the sister before scooping up the clothes. His eyes locked on the sister nun, admiration roaring inside him. Then Daichi grabbed Fiona's hand and vowed to buy every last leftover from her shop. The kids swarmed the girl with thanks. Another pal fell before Fiona's charms, and the guy's crush was obvious as he clasped her hands in his. Melissa bristled. Couldn't Mr. Asakura see Fiona shrinking away from that guy? She worried for her friend and rushed to help. Daichi sneered. He wouldn't even notice a meteorite falling. The girl snapped. What was he on about? Together, they yanked the dark-haired man by the scruff and hauled him away from Fiona. He jerked his head up and snapped. Weren't you childhood friends? Maybe they could have stayed longer. Melissa winced, calling herself an idiot for letting her guard down. De-ice pushed again. Let her guard down. What does that mean? Fiona's cuteness drew a creepy guy who nearly trailed her everywhere, leaving her terrified of men. So Melissa, frantic for her friend, rushed in to lay out the whole truth on the spot. The girls yank him by the hood. Melissa snaps. Next time, think before you grab Fiona's hand. And the dark-haired man winces, thinking he should have said that right away. They had to go back. Melissa froze in shock. The guy's conscience clenched and he couldn't leave her there trembling with Daichi to blame, so Melissa had to apologize right now. She sprang to her friend's defense and demanded if she could believe it, but Daichi pressed on. It's true. Alicia believes him. Maybe the dark-haired man really chose to apologize, and he's mortified by the whole mess. Men descended on the kids, harassing them. The street kids had just opened their shop, but they could at least count. The team seethed. Daichi snapped for them to follow. The kids were in danger. They had to go. His eyes burned from the bandits. They swarm endlessly, and lately they've been stopping more and more. Melissa's displeasure was obvious as she saw them as nothing but insects. A tide of adventurers floods in from neighboring countries, most penniless. They look like bandits, act like bandits, wear the lowest guild ranks, and the cities shun them. Their cheap gear screamed they'd owned it forever and neglected it, but he, hawk-eyed, noticed every worn detail and admired them. After arriving in Karam, Klaus invited the guy and together they tore through rows of gleaming masterwork swords. So now Daichi can read steel like a book. Don't be fooled by looks. Mages and battle-hardened adventurers lurk among them. He agreed and vowed to stay razor-sharp. Melissa brands him reckless, so she chose to shadow Daichi. The dark-haired man already knows how brutal the price of carelessness is. Nick let out a sharp meow and shot his head out from under the guy's clothes. Anything could explode into chaos at any second. Daichi clings to the hope the pet will step up when the owner is pushed. The baby gave a tiny, plaintive meow. Asakura needs a rock-solid partner. One of the boys shoved his hand aside and barked, "Get out! This shop's closed!" The man bristled with rage, but at least now he knows who's been staring at him. Didn't the kid ever learn to respect his elders? He'd heard children vanish in this town all the time. If a few more went missing, nobody would even blink. So Fiona stepped in and begged the bandits to forgive the children. Who could just turn a blind eye? The men leaned in, haggling to promise a fat purse for the girl trailing behind them. The kids, petrified, burst into wails, and the bandits, furious, barked, "Stop crying! Stop it!" Fiona hurled herself before the children, begging them not to cry and promising they'd be fine. The band chose to take a nun instead of the kids, and terror ripped through her. Daiichi burst in and wrenched the culprit's hands. The culprit groaned. A boy snarled, "Don't you touch Fiona!" The bandit begged to be released. The nun watched, and the dark-haired man smiled and apologized. Fiona opened her mouth but crumpled into tears, silencing the room. Daiichi swung back to the criminal, coldly threatening to sever his hands since they couldn't be kept with him. And the bandit panicked, begging to be released. Daiichi still had the bandit pinned. The full-grown man was sobbing like a child. Pathetic, the kind who preys on children and women. So he's first in line and can't so much as lift a finger against Daiichi. The bandits were yelling, "Who the hell is he?" Someone even asked if an ally was crying. Daiichi braced to attack. They vowed he wouldn't get away with it and would be bound once the guards were summoned, and Asakura went dead silent. What? They're going to call the guards? Are they serious? The band roared that Daiichi had struck first, trapping him. The man lunged at the nun first, and Melissa shouted that the guild employee would testify. Guilt slammed him. He should never have dragged his sister in. Everyone rallied behind Daiichi, swearing they'd stand as witnesses, and the band hissed they'd remember anyone who dared testify. He closed the distance on Melissa and demanded, "Are you from the guild?" Sneering, "What could a little girl like you possibly do there? Say your name." The bandit snapped, "What is it?" and warned that when the guards showed up, they'd still have to give their names. The others lunged forward to shield their comrade and yelled at Daiichi to let go, but the dark-haired man held fast and refused. The criminals panicked and hurled threats at him, but he already knew exactly what the guards would do. Everything snapped into place. They've got their own people inside. "This is very interesting," Daiichi asked. "Do they really think the guards will have time to save them?" Nobody understood. They demanded what he meant, and insisted his mind was sound, until Fiona pushed through and snapped, "Even for the orphans, you can't be this reckless." Asakura Daiichi strode forward, introduced himself to the nun, and flashed a grin. The girl urged the guy to wait for the guards. Maybe when they arrive, everything will be decided. Fiona trembled, hunching over the children to shield them as they begged their brother to obey their sister and spare them from blows. Melissa volunteered to wait for the guards, but Daiichi shot a look at Alicia and she nodded, letting him decide for himself. Daiichi spun around. Every head snapped to them. The band had been hurling threats. What had he said that stopped the guy cold? Fear seizing him. He clapped a hand over his nose as a weird stench slammed into him, eyes darting as he tried to pin down where it was coming from. Yes, that smell. Daiichi pressed on. They prey on women and children under the guise of ties, but the bandits are rotten to the core. They erupted in fury and blamed Asakura for the trouble, though that accusation should have come from him.